Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 1025, 1063, The Game, and the Game Nashville app. We are streaming live on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook Live every single day. And we are broadcasting live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. It's Wednesday, so Jonathan Hutton will join us in 1 hour. We'll get Hutton's reaction to some of the action we saw yesterday at OTAs, who was there, who wasn't there, what's the concern level. We'll also have Elliot Friedman 1 day early because we'll get Elliot Friedman's reaction to the Ryan McDonough move. We heard his real reaction in real time on the 32 Thoughts podcast, so we'll touch on that with Elliot and also where the Predators go next from here now that they freed up $7 million against the cap over the next 2 years. Hutton in 1 hour, Elliot Friedman in 2 hours. Nick Frazier, I know you're feeling good today. After that Mississippi State baseball game last night.
It's great. I mean, I got a new Roku remote along with seeing Mississippi State. I mean, it's great. Yeah, Roku.
Look at you riding high.
It has the volume up and down button on it. I'm going up in the world.
It is just, you are a wealth of riches today.
Just give me a burger with peanut butter and jelly and we're good.
Stop it. Stop it.
Don't start
Stop
on
it,
that
Nick.
note.
Stop it. Stop it.
Willy D-Mase, happy Wednesday. How we doing?
Hey, happy Wednesday. Things are going well. Great games last night. I didn't get a chance to see the baseball game, and I'm sure that it was a doozy, as you and Nick was telling me before air.
It was a rather boring day by Hoover standards. And then it was a walk-off Mississippi State home run at the bottom of the ninth. It was
so it made it a little bit exciting.
It
and then a basketball game. Indiana just sort of. They just wet the bed big time.
They
Last
had it.
Halliburton, he needs to stop. Don't give him the ball with 2 minutes left.
It's sad because he's so good.
He's
for
a
the
good
first
player.
47 minutes.
Yeah.
But he completely choked. I mean, Drew Holiday put the clamps on him, and he acted as if he couldn't dribble the ball no more. It was amazing to watch.
It was an epic
the defense,
choke
at least.
Yeah, and they're not going to get very
choke
many
job.
more opportunities.
Yeah, that was a game that they should have won, but they didn't. Boston took it, and as you said, Caroline, before, it's just going to be a gentleman's sweep now. They're not going to sweep them. They're going to give them one game, and that's going to be it.
Give them one as a treat.
Yeah, give them one as a treat.
You really think it's going to be that easy?
Yeah, they blew it last night. That game.
But
when you blow a game like that, I think it does sort of bleeds over into the next game. Because what was it? Like a minute and 20-something seconds left. They were up 5 points. They had to they were shooting free throws from here on out. They act as if they couldn't take the ball, throw the ball in.
They had a couple of turnovers.
It was just
that were
like
just handed the game back.
Stuff.
And Boston still had to hit a tough three out of the corner to tie
Brown,
it. It was a great shot.
Goodness.
But if they just get fouled and make the free throws,
you win the game.
I think they win the game. But I do think now the mental recovery from that is going to be the question. I do think, though, that talent-wise, I was pretty impressed.
Oh, they got talent. They got talent up and down
had
the
trouble
board.
guarding. They even missed. I felt like Halliburton was getting guys wide open threes throughout the game. They got great shots.
They just weren't knocking them down when they needed to.
Yeah. But so I don't know. Maybe they'll surprise us and stretch the series. You think a gentleman sweep?
Gentleman sweep.
I might have to take to the bank. We'll see.
I think
they can win at least a couple games.
I think 2 games.
Get at least a couple.
Oh wow,
get a couple.
Y'all more optimistic than we
They
are.
beat the Knicks. They beat the Knicks every time.
Well, the Knicks was
Indiana.
beat up. The Knicks were basically trying to drive a car with no tires, and the engine was bad.
Yeah.
And you trying to drive it down the road.
They were on fumes.
Here's
Yeah,
one
they
thing
were
about
on
the Knicks.
fumes.
They're going to nick.
Yeah, Knicks going to nick. Even though the
Jets
Knicks
are
are
going
a
to
good
jet,
team.
and the Mets are going to Met.
So that's just all New York teams.
I'm sorry,
New York
Willy.
teams are going to New York.
But the Mets
My
do
heart.
be metting sometimes.
Oh, my heart. At least the Commodores got it done yesterday. The Mets lost again, and I've got a lot of
big game
Cleveland
coming up
fans
today.
that are just, they
UT?
send me the GIFs and stuff once the game's over. That's, the Guardian stuff and, Slider running around, the mascot. It hurts. But Vanderbilt won.
Yep.
LSU won.
Yep.
It is pretty interesting in Hoover. The whole thing is we know that everybody in that tournament is probably one of the 48 best teams in the country, right? I mean, that's usually the case. The problem is you can be really good. Yeah, there's always a couple that, just have a bad year for whatever reason.
Squeaked in there because Auburn and Missouri were just that bad.
Right.
Yeah.
There's always a couple that just, cycle down.
Yeah.
But you know that the NCAA tournament committee is trying to balance the fact that they know this is the best league in the country with, I can't let everybody in the tournament, right? So there's going to be usually a team or two that is good enough to be in the tournament, could probably go win a regional, but won't be in the tournament because of that reason, right? They have to have some geographical balance. They try to find teams in the northern part of the country where it's snowing. Like the Big Ten is always tough, right? It'll be interesting when UCLA and USC are in the Big Ten.
Oh, how's that?
And they're playing games at Ohio State and Michigan State in March and April, and they're like, "Wait a minute, this isn't how we roll. We play in warm weather. What is going on?"
That's what happens when you switch conferences.
But it's hard to recruit to those. It's hard to recruit to those cities, right? Tom Izzo could go to the Michigan State baseball program, but there'd be a lot of good players say, "Tom, I love you, man. You're a great coach."
But I'm not.
I ain't playing baseball in Michigan. I'm going to Florida. Or I'm going to North Carolina or South Carolina or LSU. So that's the drama that's going on in Hoover, right? LSU and Vanderbilt feel much better about themselves having won that first game and have a chance to win another game or two to give that little extra on their resume to make sure they're in there. There's no question. There's no question they are good enough to beat some teams and maybe even win a regional as a 2 or a 3 seed. But maybe one of them doesn't get in. Like Florida has got the number 1 strength of schedule. They lost last night to Vanderbilt.
And they're
are they
going to
get in?
Above 500.
Yeah. Are they going to get in?
You have to be at least one game above 500 to even qualify for the tournament. There were 5 SEC teams sitting at 13 and 17, and that 13 conference win mark is kind of that line of demarcation of if you're 12 and 18, sorry, you're not getting in. 13, you at least are still in consideration. 5 SEC teams that were right on the bubble. Alabama lost yesterday. Florida lost yesterday. So at 13 SEC wins with 0 wins in the conference tournament, is that going to be enough to get you to a tournament? I don't know.
They're going to be sweating when that it's Memorial Day every year, right? Is it every year the Memorial Day? I think where they announce the brackets.
Yes, yeah.
So
what?
There's going to be some Memorial Day armpit sweat.
Memorial Day is this upcoming Monday.
Yeah. Okay.
So it'll
be Sunday.
Just like when we watch March Madness brackets, right? When it comes out, there's always that camera on the one team that's hoping, they're not sure.
They're sitting there like,
and there's like heartbreak sitting there. They don't make it. They go back to the locker room and they're all just dejected, like, what happened? We didn't make it.
You didn't win enough games. That's what happened.
And I sat there my sophomore year. We didn't have a camera or a team gathering, but I know that feeling. We all sat in the suite, and we were not announced until the last thing. We were a 9 seed, so we got in pretty easily, but we were waiting to that last group of teams that they announced, and then, man, did we erupt when we saw our name pop up on that thing. But that's going to happen to a couple teams. They're going to be in that situation not knowing if they're in or not.
Yeah. That's a tough situation. And tough situation for the pizza party that you have planned afterward.
Ooh, yeah.
Got to send that Papa John's back. It's
Do you think
situation.
LSU is in now?
I think after beating Georgia yesterday, a top 10 RPI team, a 11th ranked team in the country, I think that was enough to push them in. But they're up 2-0 against Kentucky right now. So if they're able to beat Kentucky, I think that's the lock. You beat Georgia, you beat Kentucky, 2 top 10 RPI teams, 2 projected host sites for a regional and a super regional. I think that's enough. And I think especially given that LSU in the last half of SEC play, in the last 15 games, were 10-5 versus 3-12 in the first half of conference play. So I do think, especially beating Kentucky today, that's got to lock them up. If they don't beat Kentucky today, I think you're entering a little bit of that gray area, but beating Georgia yesterday was huge. If they lost to Georgia, I didn't think that there was a shot that they were going to get in.
That's an interesting viewpoint because Vanderbilt, I think, has a little bit of the same scenario today. They got a big win yesterday over Florida, a team that's kind of fighting for, who knows, maybe they'll all get in. It's possible, but they got that win. Now Vanderbilt gets the chance against Tennessee.
Who does LSU play?
LSU's playing Kentucky right now.
Yeah, and Kentucky that would be a great feather in your cap if you could win that game. Just like if Vanderbilt were able to find a way to beat Tennessee today, that would strengthen. If there's any doubt, if anybody on the committees on the fence are like, ooh, that's a statement win right there.
And I think what plays into LSU's favor, Vanderbilt's favor, some of these bubble teams that are now in the double elimination bracket, they're playing 1, 2, 3, 4 seeds, where some coaches might approach it and be like, look, we're just going to save our arms. Like, we'll go out there, we'll give it our best, we're going to make it a competitive game as best as we possibly can, but we got bigger fish to fry, and we know that we're already in the tournament. Like, I do wonder, Georgia throwing a pitcher out there yesterday against LSU with a 9 ERA. Were you really pushing for that win against LSU, or were you throwing guys out there to say, hey, if we win, we win, and if we don't, we're still most likely going to be
to rest some arms.
Yes.
And you can rest some
Well,
arms.
that was what's interesting about Florida's pitcher that they started, because Florida was in kind of a, you really need to win this game, right? Would you agree that Florida, they couldn't afford to just, hey, if we win, great. If we lose, great.
Florida is very much so playing with fire right now.
Yeah.
Even a win yesterday over Vanderbilt, I don't think would even be enough. I thought Florida would have to at least get to the tournament semifinal.
I don't know enough about their pitching staff, but they threw a kid who only had 10 innings pitched the entire year. He was talented, big 6'8" left-hander.
A kid that was like 1 billion feet tall.
Yeah, and he had some left-hander, nasty stuff. I'm sure pro scouts are like, let's keep an eye on this guy. Like, I'd love to get a hold of this guy, and let's get his mechanics going, and let's see what he looks like in 5 years. I'm sure he's going to have many opportunities to pitch down the road. But this year, he didn't pitch very much, and Vanderbilt was able to scratch out a few runs, get a lead.
Yeah.
And we know in Birmingham, the other, I think, really intriguing thing about playing in that tournament, and I got a chance to play on that field one of the first years they moved it to the Hoover Met. That's how old I am. 1990 SEC tournament.
Man, you old, Willie.
Big
no,
time.
I'm just messing with you.
But the ball doesn't fly out of that park.
It doesn't.
You're not going to just sit there and bang 10 or 12 runs out unless you really earn it. If you do, that's great, but you're not going to do it by just flipping fly balls up in the air and it's just going to carry out.
Hoover and TD Ameritrade, if that's what it's still called in Omaha,
Yeah.
They are very much so pitchers' parks. So if you can play small ball, which Kentucky does very well, I believe Vanderbilt does very well, Tennessee and Georgia, they don't play small ball very well. So those parks very much so lend to being able to play small ball, that you're not just getting up to the plate and ripping dingers every single at bat. So, fun things to follow, and we'll keep everybody updated. LSU up now 2-0 in the top of the 6 as they look in the reflection behind Willy. But I do want to start with some
Good job reading the numbers backwards and everything. I might have.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, very, very talented.
We'll
Caroline's got talent.
I'll report back to my ophthalmologist.
I need to go see one to remind myself.
I want to get into some reaction from Titans OTAs yesterday. There were a lot of talk about who was there, who wasn't there. We will get into all of that. But yesterday we also heard from Brian Callahan, who was on with the Bussin' with the Boys podcast. And I always love listening to that podcast with coaches and players because it's so much more of a casual environment. Brian Callahan was letting the F-bombs fly. I know. I was surprised when I heard it too. But it's just so much more of a casual environment, and I feel like it facilitates a lot more genuine conversation. And of course, a coach is still going to give you a certain level of coach speak no matter where he's speaking. But a lot of insight there from Brian Callahan. But there was one specific clip that D-Mase, you said, I want to talk about this. And it was Brian Callahan's evaluation of what he's seen from Traylon Burks so far this offseason. This was Brian Callahan.
I'll tell you this. I only know what I've seen of him. Obviously, I know what precedes him just because I've watched it and I understand it. But from what we see on a day-to-day basis with Trey, he's been phenomenal. Like his work ethic, the things that he's done, does everything we've asked. He's got unbelievable physical talent. And it's a personal challenge to me and to our staff is how do we find the best role for Trey to come help us? Like I think he can be a good player. I do think guys get in these situations sometimes. For example, they trade AJ and they draft him. There's just intense amount of pressure on him to be AJ or to replace AJ. And I think that wears on guys sometimes when it doesn't go well to start. And it's hard to be a really good player at receiver as a rookie. I think it's hard. I think it's a difficult task. And so for him, there might have been a compounding factors of all that pressure he felt. And then to be able to go play fast and play aggressive and be free of that, I think is hard. So what I'm hopeful for is that the addition of these veteran players that we have in here, a new lease for him in terms of all I know is what he's shown me, and I don't make any judgments on what's happened before. And that opportunity to reinvent yourself in a sense, I think is going to be really good for him. And I've been impressed with what he's done so far, and I think he can play, but it's like a personal challenge for me to find a place for him to have some success because he's got the talent and ability to do it.
Again, that was Brian Callahan on With the Bus and With the Boys podcast. And I think the biggest question we all have about Treylon Burks is he going to be able to stay healthy? So far, so good, but it's May 22nd. You know, we're through 2 days of OTAs. It's a long offseason, and it's a long season. I can't tell you today if Treylon Burks will be able to stay healthy for the entirety of a 17-game season. But just based off of, the short period of time that Brian Callahan has had to look at Treylon Burks, to get to know Treylon Burks, D-Mase, what were some of your biggest takeaways from what Brian Callahan had to say there?
I think they are behind the scenes counting on him because he brings something to the offense that none of the other guys bring. He has a combination of, size, speed, strength, the ability to cause a mismatch. No one else on that team has it at that position. D-Hop used to have it. He's getting a little bit older now, so it doesn't, some things have changed with him. Still a damn good player, but him getting down the field, people are not scared. People are not. That's not what's on the, Wednesday morning scouting report that D-Hop, is a deep threat. That's not on there. Calvin Ridley, he can be a deep threat, but he's not the run after the catch, the physical. He doesn't have that physical presence that Treylon Burks has. And same as Tyler Boyd. Treylon, I was watching clips of Treylon yesterday that I think it was either Jim Wyatt had or Paul had, and they were showing all the wide receivers. And listen, this is not some like I've come like some moment where I had this epiphany about the receivers. No, I'm watching every receiver run the same route, every receiver, and they all look the same. They all boom boom go in, and then I see 15. Is that Treylon's number 15? 16. And then I see 16. He looks totally different from all of them. Totally different from all of them. He's bigger. He has more of a physical presence. I think he gives them an opportunity to do what AJ was able to do. I'm not saying he is AJ, but he gives them the ability to do what AJ did for them for those 2 seasons, well, 3 seasons, I believe. The other receivers don't know, and Brian, Coach Callahan, he understands that. The coaching staff understands that. That's why they're trying to put him in a position. They just don't want to lock him up as the X or the Z. They're saying, you learn all these positions because we want you on the field, because you are the one guy that truly causes a matchup problem. If you are on your game, that defensive coach, he's worried about you because you have a combination that none of the other receivers have. The other receivers are good. D-Hop's great. He's going to be a Hall of Famer, but he doesn't possess what Treylon possessed at this moment. I've always said, if Treylon is the wild card in this receiving core, if he pops, there's no receiver core in the league better than this one because they have the depth. They would have the depth. They would have the experience. And now they got a young cat that they can rely on moving forward because these guys, the other 2 or 3, going to age out pretty soon here. They want Treylon to be that guy that walks with Will Levis into that new stadium. He hasn't shown it yet because he's been injured. But that's what they believe. Like, he has the talent. They know. He said it's a personal challenge to me. Coach Callahan just said, he said that. It's a personal challenge to him and the coaching staff. Why? Because if he ain't had no damn talent, it wouldn't be a personal challenge to them. We've always said every coach come in thinking, I can be the one that changed that guy that has the immense potential. I can be the guy. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. Coach Callahan and that coaching staff believe they can do it. But Treylon has to do his part, meaning stay on the field. Because when he's on the field and you get him involved, he showed you he can play. So that's what they're hoping. They're hoping, and it's a big ass hope. I understand that, but that's what they're hoping, that if he pops, no one's going to be able to deal with our passing game. But if he doesn't pop, our passing game will still be good. Once we all sort of mesh together, once we figure this thing out, it still would be good. But Traylon is the one guy that can put it over the scale. He can tip the scale in our favor each and every game because you don't know who to guard now. You got I could put 4 wide receivers out there. You don't know who to guard now. I can put Traylon out there with D-Hop. Now everybody has to shift over to Traylon. D-Hop's one-on-one or Calvin Ridley's one-on-one. I think the perfect picture for them would be Traylon and Calvin Ridley. That would be their perfect picture. Why? Because you got a young guy, a young stud that poses a matchup problem that can get deep, and then you got another guy that has proven his worth in this league that can flat out play in Calvin Ridley. We know what D-Hop can do. We know what Tyler Boyd can do. But these are not guys that are going to be in your thoughts 2 or 3 years down the line. Traylon is the guy, and Ridley is the guy. So if Traylon can hit this season like they want him to, it's a big if. I know that. But he tilts the scale for this offense if he hits the way they believe he can.
And if he can't?
If he can't, then we got to go in another direction.
We move on.
Yeah, we move on.
But this year, if he can't, I'm just saying, this year, if he can't, I think you're still in okay position.
Oh, yeah, they'll still be fine from a pass standpoint. They'll still be fine. But Traylon is the one guy
forward.
that he's that ace in the hole. If you're able to play him and he stays on the field, watch and see what happens. That's all I say.
I'm working my way through the whole podcast. I haven't even gotten to listen to that whole part about Burks. I'm working through the beginning part where he's talking a lot about his background and also how his father and he have gone on very different paths that had never worked near each other until now. Yeah. Very, very fascinating stuff. I commend the Bussin' with Boys dudes. You know, they create a good environment where a guy's comfortable having and it takes a while to get through it, but that's
a long podcast.
That's what's good about podcasts. There's no clock, right? You can just go as long as you want.
And then edit it afterward.
Yeah, if you want to edit it, do it. If not, just leave it in there. But I do like the approach of, look, I can only see. I'm not. This happens a lot with college coaches. You come in saying, look, I know so-and-so is supposed to be really good, but I've never been with them every day, so I'm going to give everybody a clean slate. So that's music to my ears if I'm Traylon Burks, because now he knows that he's got a fresh start, and he's going to be given an opportunity. Even though, as we've talked about a lot, he sees that they've made these moves for other guys, and he knows the pathway maybe is not as wide as it was, but at least he knows that he can make his own impression on the new staff.
Quickly before we go to break, he reminds me a bit, and I'm just talking about stature when you compare him to the other receivers. He reminds me of Tyrone Calico from this standpoint. You know, you had Drew. Drew was a tall 6'6", but physically, he just wasn't. Drew wasn't a big guy. He was more of a lanky guy, hell of a player, but a lanky guy. You know. Then you had myself. You had Justin McCairns. We all were different. But when you added Tyrone Calico, Tyrone was much different from all of us. You saw the difference in his presence, as far as he was 6'5". He was about 220. He was just physically imposing. That's how I look at Traylon Burks. Tyrone couldn't put it together, one, because of the injury. He had after the horse collar, it never was right for him. And it seems like, you know, Traylon's dealing with his injury stuff as well. So when I look at receivers, and I looked at those guys yesterday, it reminded me so much of what I used to see with Tyrone Calico. Like, amongst all of us, you stand out because your physical presence. Amongst all of those guys, Traylon Burks stands out because of his physical presence. Now he needs to sort of tie all of that in together and be able to stay on the field, because that's what they're hoping.
Which is the reason why the Titans drafted him in the first round in the first place. The physicality, the just sheer talent. Mm-hmm. The God-given talent. That's why he's a first-rounder. We saw it in college, and we've seen flashes of it. We at least saw it in training camp last year. But it's can that come out in the field? Mm-hmm. Can you stay healthy? Can you stay healthy long enough to make an impact into this offense? We're going to continue to get into Brian Callahan's thoughts on the Bussin' with the Boys podcast. Plus, speaking of Traylon Burks, another Titans wide receiver made some comments about Burks that have gone viral and everybody's kind of freaking out about it. My question is it really that big of a deal? What do we make of it? We'll get into that coming up next. And, of course, your thoughts as well. 615-737-1025 is the phone number. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. We're brought to you by Zen Sports. Start earning cash rewards on your bets today. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older and in Tennessee to bet.
All right, let's tell you the message from Loan Pronto. That means if you're out there and you are being bogged down by big bills, and especially ones that have a high interest rate, a credit card bill that you get every month, and you're like, man, I'm just not knocking that number down. It's hard to do it. A car loan that's got a big interest rate, you're like, man, I'm a long way from getting that thing paid off. Well, here is the tool that you can use. If you're a homeowner, your home's value in our listening area in particular is likely way up, and you can use that to wipe out a lot of these bills we're talking about by using money from your home's equity. So call Loan Pronto and use their engine, the Equity Express line of credit. They can make it happen, and the process is simple and smooth. We've done it ourselves in the Donick House. It's worked well for us. Call now and find out about it. You can get approval in a very short period of time. A lot of times, no appraisal, most of the time, in fact, no hassle, and then you have that cash to go knock out your game plan. Get that credit card bill to zero. Pay off that car, whatever it might be. So call now, 615-499-5780. That's 615-499-5780, or go to loanpronto.com. Equal housing lender, NMLS 1661781, subject to lender approval.
Last year, throughout the season, have you kind of been a little bit just heading into this offseason about maybe the fact that there's certainly a lot of additions and top-level competition at this time?
No, I don't need to talk to Traylon about anything. Traylon's a grown man. You know, he gets it.
Are we sleeping on him a bit?
Pardon me?
Are we sleeping on him a bit? Outsiders looking at that group and the additions?
Trying to think I answer that without like a negative sound bite. Are we sleeping on Traylon? Nein means no in German.
What are the possibilities for Traylon this year, do you think?
I mean, Traylon's one of the most athletic people I've ever played with. The guy's as big as he is and fast as he is. So I'm looking forward to see what he does this year.
All right, there you go. That was DeAndre Hopkins in the post-OTAs press conference yesterday. So I heard that from D-Hop. I believe it sounded like Steve Lehman asked the question, are we sleeping on Traylon? And DeAndre Hopkins, in German, says no.
Thank you for that
Yeah.
that lesson.
Thank you for the language lesson.
Exactly, absolutely.
And he followed up on Twitter because Terry McCormick tweeted out what he said, and DeAndre Hopkins quote tweeted it and said, the media is the only one sleeping on Traylon Burks. No one in the locker room doubted him or slept on him. Quote, we are not people. I can't speak for, quote, people, so 9, he's never been slept on to us. Thank you, come again.
We are not people. What? So what he said is when the question was asked, people are sleeping. So he said
the question
he's not
was,
a part of the people.
are people
Okay.
sleeping on Traylon Burks? And he said, well, we're not people.
Okay, I get it.
So, D-Mase, I'm sure that you can probably relate to a certain extent of being the veteran in the room and wanting to defend your guys, wanting to instill confidence in some of the young guys. I kind of understand that. But if I'm going to defend Steve Lehman a little bit, I feel like DeAndre Hopkins is taking this a little bit too far. To me, it felt like, and this is just my opinion, and you could feel totally differently. To me, I felt like that was Steve Lehman's way of saying, hey, are we, all of us, the media, the fans, national media, are we all not giving Traylon Burks enough credit? That felt like an opportunity for DeAndre Hopkins to not take it as personally as I feel like he was taking it.
I mean, I get it.
It's not a big deal to me.
He wants to defend, his guys, and
I
I
appreciate
understand that, and I appreciate it. I've done it before, But I mean, listen, Steve had a good point. Like, listen, from what we've seen, he hasn't shown much. Even your own coaching staff. Don't listen to us. Listen to your own coaching staff.
Yeah.
They're telling you. So I understand where D-Hop, because I would have did the same thing that he did. I probably wouldn't have did the whole German kneel. I wouldn't have did that. But I would have defended Traylon Burks too. But in defending him, I would have said, as a veteran guy, as I have said when they've asked me about young guys, listen, he has to, he has to produce. He has to show up. He has to get better. And that's just being honest. And that's what I would have said after I said, listen, we believe in him. We think he can go get the job done. He is, from a physical standpoint, the most imposing guy in our locker room, in our receiver room. I want to see it. He needs to be available. Those are truths. Those are things that you say to Traylon. It's not, I don't have to talk to him. He's a grown man. No. We talk. Y'all don't need to know what we talk about, but yeah, we talk. But y'all don't need to know. But I wouldn't sit here and say I don't need to talk to him. I do. He's a young guy. I'm a veteran guy. So I do need to talk to him. Why? Because here's the deal. I would have been able to talk to him because I was in that situation. I wasn't a first rounder, but I was in the situation Traylon was in. People there are speculations of you being traded, get rid of you. This is your last go around. If you don't get it right, then they're going to trade. I've been there. People that haven't been there can't relate to that. So if the question is asked to me, I could say, we'll talk or we've talked, but I'm not telling y'all what we talked about. Just be upfront with them in that regard, because it's like, I am not going to try to say something opposite of that because everybody sees what's going on.
Yeah.
And if I tried to say something contrary to that, they've been looking at me like, you crazy. Like, dude, don't you see what we see? Yeah, I see it. I want him to get better, but this is my guy. I know he can do it, but he needs to do it. That's just being honest.
And I didn't view it as like a question to try to trap D-Hop
Yeah, I
into
don't
saying
think
something
so.
negative about Traylon Burks. Honestly, I thought it was an opportunity for DeAndre Hopkins to sing Traylon Burks' praises.
But D-Hop is very defensive. And I'm not saying this as a bad thing or a good thing, but from what we've seen at times, he can be defensive. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But when these questions are asked, they're not just asked just because, we want to, pick on Traylon, or we want to, call or start something. No, these are legitimate questions. Are people sleeping on, Traylon Burks? Because what we're seeing is totally different from maybe what you're seeing as a player in the locker room. So now give us your answer based upon what I just asked you. And listen, again, D-Hop got defenses, which is cool. There's nothing wrong with protecting your guys. I would have did it too. But then I also would have said, Traylon has to, he knows that this is his year, that he has to make it right. Mm-hmm. And that's just Traylon knows that. Coaching staff knows it.
Yeah.
So.
We've seen this kind of thing before. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think sometimes the media's just got to let it roll off their back a little bit. It's not anything personal, I don't think. I just think it's sometimes you get that competitive edge. Mm-hmm. You want to back your teammate. Exactly. And so you push back a little bit. I also think what comes to mind when putting together what he just said there and what Callahan said in the last segment is that there is a reason sometimes a guy is a first-round pick. Mm-hmm. The physical gifts and tools that he has are not easily found in NFL players. So he is in a high percentile with that, which is why he was the number one pick and why they're going to be more patient with him. So it's what gives you hope that the light could still go on with him. And when you hear a guy like DeAndre Hopkins talk about how rare it is with the skill set that Burks has and what he sees, you can see why he's like, man, we really need this guy.
There was two guys in our receiver room when I went to Baltimore. Didn't have so much of that here in Nashville, because when Drew and Justin came along, first when Kevin came, we all were young. Myself, Joey Kent, Kevin, we all were trying to figure this thing out together. But I think once we started to become, once we got that veteran sort of experience, I didn't have to deal with, because Drew came in, it's a free agent. Many didn't expect much of him.
Undrafted free agent. Yeah.
He came in and wowed everybody in camp. So it was like, okay, that kid can play. Justin came in and did what he was supposed to do. So those guys were on their stuff, but they didn't have this moniker of being a first rounder either. So, Kevin did on the other, but we all were so young. But when I went to Baltimore, they had two guys there. Two guys that I thought, one was a second rounder and one was a later round. Clarence and DeVar. DeVar from Washington State, second round pick, hell of an athlete. I mean, those two guys, DeVar was 6'2", Clarence 6'6", imposing physically, both of them. I would walk into that receiver room when I knew we were not getting what we needed to get. I would tell them, like, listen, y'all need to pick y'all game up. I expect more. Y'all have more. I wish I was 6'2". I wish I was 6'6". The talent that y'all have physically, I wish I had that. Y'all have it. Y'all need to use it. I said, and this is real. I said, y'all will never beat me out because y'all don't work harder than me. Y'all don't use your gifts the way you're supposed to use them. The physical talent, you got it. You don't use it the way you're supposed to use it. They heard it. They got better. But those are the things that you say to those guys. Maybe D-Hop has said that to Traylon, but he's not going to tell anybody. But you can't say, well, I don't need to talk to him. Yeah, you do, because he needs to hear it from you, just like those younger guys needed to hear it from me. Like, listen, you're slipping. You're 6'2", run a 4.4, 4.3, 6'5", run a 4.5. Y'all physically imposing over everybody. And y'all not taking advantage of that. What's going on? Mm-hmm. And they heard me. Those are the things that need to be said to Traylon. Like, dude, you 6'3", 6'4". There's no one. DBs should be scared to press you. Scared to press you. Why? Because you're going to break their forearms the minute they get in your grill. They're going to be scared. They should be scared to press you. But they're not, because you don't use your height, strength, weight to your advantage. You're 6'5", playing like you're 5'5". Mm-hmm. That's Traylon. Traylon's 6'4", he needs to play 6'3", 6'4". He's not 5'10", 5'8", 5'7". He needs to play big like he is. And that's something that I would tell him, because it's the truth. And those are things that I'm sure that D-Hop is telling Traylon, but he wouldn't tell us, and I don't expect him to. Exactly, I don't expect him to tell us. But those are the things you have to express to Traylon. That, dude, you are a physically imposing individual, and you got the talent to play this position. Use it. Go out there and dominate. You're the best receiver on this field. I don't care what I've done in the past. You're the best from a talent standpoint. You're the best receiver on this field. Now go and prove it, because he is. He's better than Ridley, he's better than D-Hop, and he's better than Tyler Boyd at this present time, the physical nature of him. I'm not talking about the talent. I'm not talking about him going out there and putting up the numbers. I'm talking about that talent. Yeah, he's the one. That's why they're hoping that he pops, because if he pops, it tilts the scale for this receiving core.
It tilts the scale for this receiving core this year, and it answers some questions that you have going into the future. And I think that everything that you said there is spot on. And also back to what Brian Callahan said on the Bussin' with the Boys podcast. Well, now he has a new lease. Now he has a clean slate, a fresh start. That's another thing that leads into Traylon Burks' favor. You've got all the talent in the world, and now you got a clean slate. So whatever, weight that you felt on your shoulders with the last coaching regime, I'm not saying that he did feel that, but I'm saying maybe he did. Being attached to A.J. Brown, all of that is gone.
I'm sure he did.
I'm sure he did. And it wasn't very good from the start. So if he was feeling that heavy, all of that is gone now. And another thing, might I add, no, we're not sleeping on Traylon Burks because there's nothing to sleep on. He hadn't done anything.
Yeah, you're right.
Are we sleeping on the addition of Tony Pollard because he's proven to be a really good running back in this league? Maybe. We can have that conversation. Are we sleeping on Traylon Burks? No, he's a first-round pick and he hasn't done anything.
Yeah, you got a point there. So.
All right, I want to get into your thoughts on this coming up next, and also wrap up some of our thoughts on Titans OTAs before we catch up with Jonathan Hutton at the top of the hour. 615-737-1025 is the phone number if you want to get in on this. You can tune in to 94.9 The Fan today as the Nashville Sounds take on the Charlotte Knights at First Horizon Park. Pre-game at 6:20, first pitch at 6:35 p.m., with coverage also available on 94.9 The Fan app and at 949thefan.com. Sounds baseball on 94.9 The Fan, presented by Twin Peaks, Family Leisure, and Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning.
Hey, this is Derek Mason, and you heard me tell you about Dr. Lodge and his staff at Cool Springs MD for some time, people. If you have set out to lose weight, chances are it's not your first time setting a resolution to shed some extra pounds only to face disappointment. But I want you to know that you're not the only person in this boat. There's thousands of people that do this every year and end up not reaching the goal that they set out. But at Cool Springs MD, Dr. Lodge and his team understands the frustration of this cycle, and that is why they offer a different approach to weight loss. You got to come at this thing at different angles, people, okay? Their comprehensive weight loss program is led by Dr. Lodge and addresses the root cause of weight gain with tailored nutrition, exercise, blood test supplements, and more. They will customize a program specific to you and no one else. So connect with Dr. Lodge at CoolSpringsMD.com today to schedule your appointment for a personalized weight loss plan just for you, people. That's Cool Springs MD, where your weight loss journey becomes a success story.
Join Cromwell Media along with local athletes and musicians at Hermitage Golf Course on June 20th for the 615 Open. Make a difference while supporting Souls for Souls. Every $20 raised goes to a new pair of shoes for a local child experiencing homelessness. So sign up to play or sponsor at 615open.com. We'll catch up with Jonathan Hutton in just over 10 minutes, but first, I want to get to your reaction on our conversation about Treylon Burks, your reaction to what DeAndre Hopkins had to say in English and German about Treylon Burks. So we're going to get right to you unless we have some thoughts.
Let's go to the phone.
Let's get to the phones. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. 615-737-1025 is the phone number if you want to get in on the conversation. Caleb in Gallatin texts in, says, Derek, do any receivers, whether it be on the Titans roster or another team, come to you for mentorship or advice? I think back to when Derrick Henry talked to Eddie George, and the next thing you know, Henry takes over the team. Can we get you to do the same for Burks?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say I've talked with Treylon, and I'm not going to say I haven't talked with Treylon. I think Treylon understands what's at stake here. And I think he's going to do everything possible to make sure he's in the best position physically to be out there and do what's necessary. So, whether he and I have, spoken or not, that's between he and I. But he realizes, like, I don't think he's just playing for this team. He's playing for 32 other teams or 31 other teams. Because maybe it doesn't work here doesn't mean it's not or can't work somewhere else. So, you have to go into this season not thinking about, being here, but, thinking about me putting something good on tape, period, for the other 31 teams, because they may sign you back, they may extend, they may not. But at least you want to have the option to say, you know what, I played damn good football this season, and now my options are open to go to other places. But if you don't go out there and do what you need to do, then your options are going to be very, very limited. So
fair point. And there's been so much Treylon Burks trade, scenarios. So I've seen so many of them. Like we touched on one from Bill Barnwell. And to that point, look, if it doesn't work out here for Treylon Burks, for the sake of his career, it has to work out somewhere else. You don't get very many opportunities in this league. NFL, not for long.
Yeah. So he, so this is a big season for him regardless of whether he's a Titan or not. If he wants to continue to play in this league, he's going to have to show something. He's going to have to show that he can consistently be out on the field. And I think that's first and foremost. Yeah. Before anything else, he has to show that he is available. Yeah. And he hasn't been available the last 2 seasons.
Available, reliable.
Exactly.
David in Arkansas Texan says, I think this team getting a new coaching staff could be good for Burks. More of a passing attack could equal more opportunities.
Yeah, it can. And I think I mentioned that much when they first hired Brian Callahan as coach. I said this gives Treylon an opportunity to really show that, he can be a player in this league because of, Coach Callahan's philosophy about throwing the football, getting people involved. I don't think the last regime did that. And I spoke up and I said it. They didn't do a good job at identifying. Well, they may have identified. Well, they didn't do a good job at identifying all of their playmakers. They did a good job identifying 1 or 2, but not the rest of them. And it showed. So to me, this coaching staff, they want to get the best out. They want to get the best out of Treylon. So I think if he's available, then you will see a different Treylon Burks than what you've seen the past 2 seasons.
How much, D-Mase, do you think OTAs for a first-year staff are more important than OTAs for a staff that's been together for a while? Like this is a new era here. Are these should we be paying more attention to the OTAs? Because I'm always one that says, look, in May, I'm not going to really overreact to anything.
Yes and no. Yes, it's important because anytime you could be on the field, it's a good time for a coach. Because why? They want to, coaches are here to be teachers. And they enjoy, if you're a coach, you enjoy teaching. You enjoy, watching others progress in their careers. You get excitement and enjoy out of watching that. So if you're on the field more, that's great for you as a coach because you just want to coach the guys. So I think it's, from that standpoint, it's very important to sort of look at training camp or OTAs in that fashion when you have a new coach, because anytime they can be on the field with these players, it's a good time. Because why? We are learning more of the offense, not just in the classroom, but we're able to take what we learned in the classroom and implement it on the field. I was one that, listen, okay, write it on the board. I get it. I get the concepts. But I don't really get it until I hit the field, until we run those plays. And that's how I think some coaches feel like I can write all this stuff on a chalkboard or the blackboard all day or put it on the computer all day. But until we get out on the field, that's when I'm going to really see if it's sinking in or not.
Yeah.
So anytime they can be out there, that's a good time, Willie, in regards to the OTA. But as far as like, okay, is this guy practicing or the offense don't look as good? No, I'm not worried about that. It's OTAs. It's new.
And I was talking about this with Robbie and Joe this morning. They asked me, how concerned I was about players not being out there. And I said, well, it depends on why they're not out there. Like T'Vondre Sweat, it was reported that he wasn't on the field. And I thought, okay, well, why isn't he on the field? Is it just because he didn't feel like going to voluntary OTAs? Because although it's voluntary, you're a rookie.
A rookie would never not.
It's not voluntary if you're a rookie.
A rookie would never not go to voluntary OTAs.
Right. And then it was reported, I saw Joe put it out there, I saw TD put it out there, that he was getting rehab. Okay. Well, on what? What kind of injury is it? And Paul Kuharski reported that it was something minor and not a big deal. Okay, great. Like, those are the things that are important. Oh, if you win the day, quote unquote, in OTAs, that doesn't mean you're winning a Super Bowl.
Nah.
But there are things that you can pick up on, and at this time of year, you're gonna look into everything that you possibly can with all of the questions that we have about this team moving forward.
Yeah, you just want
can't overreact to one day of OTAs, but it's fair to be concerned about certain things that you might see or not see.
Yeah, you just want to get 1% better each and every day. I'm not worried about Sweat not being there because we got to understand this. Just look at it. I want people to look at it from this standpoint. You got these rookies coming in, and I guarantee you, see, we have a magnifying glass on this team because we're here. But I guarantee you in Chicago, guarantee you in Baltimore, I guarantee you in Dallas, there's a rookie that's not practicing right now because of rehab. Why? Haven't I told everybody this a million times? What have I said?
I have learned from you, D-Mase,
what have I said?
That when you train for the combine and you train for the draft, it's different than when you get out on the field for
Why do you think Marvin Harrison Jr. chose not to train for the combine, but what did he say? I'm training for what? An NFL season.
Well, he also didn't have to. Not everybody Marvin Harrison.
He was in a different position than some of these.
But from this, he was right. Just because sometimes it takes a guy like him to do it, and then everybody else looks at it and say, you know what? He's absolutely right. I shouldn't have to do it. Because, listen, if I'm projected a first rounder or a second rounder, why do I have to go through all these drills? I need to be getting ready for the NFL season. I know I'm going to be a first rounder, or I know I'm going to be a second rounder. Why do I need to, I can work on these drills, but I need to get myself ready for an NFL season. Sweat's not ready for an NFL season, and I didn't expect him to be ready. That's why he's in the training room. It's probably a hamstring or something, a strain here and there, something minor. No, what I'm saying is something minor.
Yeah, and that's what Paul Kuharski
exactly.
reported.
So to me, something minor is, he felt just tightness in his hamstring. Yeah. All right, cool. Let's set him back. Why? We don't need him right now. He don't need to play right now. We're not playing games. So let the young man sit, rehab, and then condition yourself to play a season. Every rookie in the NFL is conditioning themselves right now as we speak for a season. It's not just relegated or delegated to a Tennessee Titan thing. Every rookie that comes in is not physically ready to play a NFL season. No one is. None of them. Not even Marvin Harrison. He ain't even work out. He ain't even do all the drills. Yeah. I guarantee he's not ready. So let's not hold that against them if they have if they're not practicing a day or two.
And I wouldn't, look, that's fine. If it's something minor, then okay, that's fine. But when I initially see that he's not practicing,
you wonder why.
Why?
Yeah.
Oh, he's rehabbing. What's he rehabbing? So I think it's fair to have those questions and concerns. It's something minor. Okay, May 22nd, I'm not going to freak out about it. If this becomes a thing and come August 16th at training camp and he's still struggling to stay on the field, well, then the concern ramps up a little bit.
I tell y'all this. Sweat will miss more practices, especially as we start to get into 2-a-days. Some of it may be coaches holding him out 1 day or 2 days. It may be another 1 or 2 days that he has to not practice because he feels a twinge or something. He's a rookie. If this was a veteran player, I would be concerned because he knows what to expect coming in.
Quick scoreboard update before we end the hour here. LSU up 7-0 over Kentucky.
Whoa.
LSU hit a grand slam to make Caroline feel a little bit better about the game, and LSU had a no-hitter through 6. Kentucky managed to get a hit in the 7th inning to break it up, but
it's interesting.
looking at a shutout here.
Whenever the no-hitter ended, it was about 30 seconds after you mentioned something about it, Willy.
I know. I feel bad about that. I
You
feel bad about
jinxed
that.
it, Willy.
I should have said. I should have been the creative way the announcers. He hasn't allowed a hit through 6. But if you sometimes
you
like
say
they
the
don't want to
words.
say no hitter.
Yeah.
If you say no hitter, that is a jinx.
That
throws it
ruins
off.
it
Yeah,
completely.
But sorry about that if that was on me. But I think you'll take the win. They're well on their way here. So but Kentucky, one of the best teams in the country. Chance for 1 overall seed. Good impression for the defending champs.
I would like to put the word out there that we back up. We back up. Jonathan Hunt will join us.
Caroline with the
coming up
wire
next.
reference. I love it.
Jonathan Hunt will join us coming up next. We'll get his reaction to OTAs. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 1025, 1063, The Game in the Game Nashville app. We're streaming live on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook Live every single day. And we are broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. We were supposed to speak with Jonathan Hutton. We'll catch up with Hutton, Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow later in the show. We'll see. But
the mic has gone cold, at least for now.
At least for now.
No hot mic, at least at this point.
Cold mic.
It's cold mic.
At least with Hutton. Maybe not with Withrow. I don't know.
Withrow, I think his mic is always on somewhere.
It could always
He's
be
got
on.
a hot mic at all times.
At all times.
Yeah.
At all times. So we'll catch up with Hutton later. Elliot Friedman joins us one day early this week because we had to get Elliot's reaction to the Ryan McDonough move, the Ryan McDonough trade, and where the Predators go next from here. And that's exactly where I want to go now, is the Nashville Predators. Massive move yesterday. Ryan McDonough traded to the Tampa Bay Lightning for a second-round pick. Now, the Predators have nearly $7 million of cap space to play with, since Ryan McDonough's entire salary is now off the books. Several different avenues there. How do you replace Ryan McDonough? What do you add to the defense? We'll get into all of that. But Barry Trotz joined Stillman and Company yesterday to talk about the trade and, of course, also to talk about the goaltender position.
I noticed, I listened to the whole thing twice just to make sure I got this, but he did not ask Barry Trotz about firing Carl Taylor for not playing Yaroslav Askarov.
Interesting.
It just didn't. That didn't come up.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
I just threw that out. It was otherwise. It was a fantastic interview.
Let's take a vote. Should Jared have asked Barry Trotz about firing Carl Taylor? I say yes.
Yep.
Aye.
So
well,
I was the one that brought it up.
It's unanimous.
He didn't. He could have at least asked about how he handled how he felt Taylor handled Askarov. It's sort of moved in the past. Askarov is back.
Yeah.
Game 3 is tonight. It's a huge one to keep an eye on tonight. Askarov presumably will be in there again. Mm-hmm. He played very well in Game 2, but didn't come up.
Interesting.
Didn't come up.
Askarov also back up.
He's back up.
He's back up.
Yeah, he's back up.
Back up.
Stringer Bell.
So, Jared
D-Mase
asked.
said the great call on that. We forgot about. I could not remember Stringer Bell's name.
Stringer Bell.
Yeah.
You just don't meet very many Stringer Bells.
Great show.
Anybody named Stringer Bell, you better watch out.
You better watch out. You better watch out. Jared did ask Barry, though, about some questions about the goalie position of timeline, because let's not forget, UC Saros is under contract for another year. Of course, you would want to resolve things sooner rather than later, so you don't have to get into, trade deadline talks, free agency talks, but he is under contract for another year. So the timing, and not just the short-term timing, but the long-term timing. So let's talk short-term timing. Jared asked Barry Trotz, does he have to make a decision about UC Saros' future, about Askarov's future by July-ish, just to get UC Saros signed by the beginning of the season? This is what Barry Trotz had to say about the timeline.
No, I just spent 2 hours with Juice. We were at a foundation event where the Preds Foundation gave an enormous amount of money, $850,000 to local charities, and Juice was and myself were there at the event together, and we had a good talk. And I just said, he's in the know with everything I'm doing, and I'm in no hurry. He's in no hurry. He still has another year, and I said, I'll reach out to your agents. I got to take care of this, and this before I can even reach out to him. But he's going to be in the fold. And if I start, next year, and if it's Juice and another goalie, or Juice and Askarov, I'm fine with that. We really, Askey, has had a little bit of up and down season. More so because of injury, not necessarily his play. But, there's a different pressure playing in the American Hockey League. And you forget, he's only 21 years old. I mean, look around the National Hockey League, how many 21-year-olds are having any kind of success in the National Hockey League? And it's probably the answer, without me looking at every team, it's probably zero. So you have to realize he's still a young player. He's still a young man who's still learning the game. He is athletically and physically, is a little bit of a unicorn. But the mental game and all the other technical game, they all have to come together before that eliteness.
Again, that was Barry Trotz
So
with Jared
he said a lot
yesterday.
there.
A lot to unpack there, as OBB often does, Open Book Barry. If we're going to talk about the short-term timeline, my biggest takeaway there is Barry Trotz isn't in a rush. If he goes into this season with UC Saros unsigned, and as he said, whether that's UC Saros and insert backup goaltender here, UC Saros and Askarov as the backup goaltender, okay. But it doesn't sound like there's any rush to get the deal done by July 1st.
Well, that's you can't even, in theory, make a deal. The first
Until
day
what,
you can
June
do it,
1st?
July 1st.
July 1st.
So you can't even come to the table with an offer officially until July 1st. Can you lay the groundwork before then? I'm sure that there are ways to do that, but I would be very surprised if they, on the morning of July 1st, said it's done, it's all over, we are committed, here's the next deal. I think it will be, and Barry Trotz has said this, a process. So the question was, do you have to have it a certain way this summer? Does this need to be resolved this summer? And I think you just heard a very long answer that says there's a lot of different ways that this can go. But
and there were like 2 more minutes to that answer.
Yeah, but there are themes that jump out every time he's asked about this. Number one, he will continue to reiterate how young Yaroslav Askarov still is. Even though we've been hearing his name for a few years now, he is still only 21 years old. He turns 22 this summer. That is a baby. And he made the reference point. He goes, look around the league, name me the goalies that are dominating the league at his age. And he says, off the top of my head, I can't think of one, basically. And I think that's true. I don't think that there are, and we've noted there have been a few very talented goalies the last couple of years who have been given an opportunity to take the starting role in their young 20s, and they have failed and have had to go back to the minor leagues.
Yeah.
So I think he has been laying it out that he would kind of like to have Saros going into the season as the number one, Askarov, and probably another goalie in there, whether that's Lankinen agreeing to another deal. And it's tricky because if you lock in Lankinen for another deal, I don't know that Lankinen is going to want to come back for just 1 year.
Yeah.
And he's probably going to want to raise. He had a good year. And you can't just send Lankinen to the minors if you want to bring Askarov up to play some games. And I do think the ideal scenario is you would, even if Askarov is your number 3, which I can see, I think I want another guy that has played some NHL games that I can maybe yo-yo up and down from the majors to the minors. Mm-hmm. That's not easy, right? Because Lankinen, if you do that, you have to waive him, and 32 teams could take him for nothing off the waiver wire.
Yeah.
Right? So that's a difficult thing to navigate. But I hear a theme every time I hear Barry Trotz say he wants UC Saros and he wants Askarov to he doesn't believe Askarov is ready today.
Yeah.
What I gather from that is starting to make me change my mind. Not necessarily about how I feel about UC Saros as a player, but how this theme may end up being for UC and the Nashville Predators moving forward. Do I think the Predators should sign UC to a long-term deal, whatever, obviously we don't know the money. But, yeah, I think, you don't get better by deleting, by subtracting really good players. So my thought would be to sign UC to a 7-year contract, whatever, 7. I know people are cringing over the 8. So let's just say if you can get away with a 7 or a 6-year contract, whatever the money, we'll talk about the money later. But I would like to have UC Saros here. But what I'm starting to realize now is that Barry would like him here, but it's not like he's bound to it. Like, I'm not bound to having him here. Like, if something comes across my desk that I just can't refuse, then
which is another consistent answer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If he's been consistent with that, that's why I'm starting to believe, like, okay,
but
as much as I like Saros, there is a possibility he may not be here.
And I think that's good GMing.
Yes, that's good GMing.
Uh-huh.
I agree with that. I am one that I believe that what's going to happen is they will end up signing Saros to another deal. But I've always said, if somebody calls and says, here's the offer I want to give you for Saros, and it's just too good to refuse, then you're not doing your job. Because Barry says this all the time. I'm always going to do what's best for the Nashville Predators,
exactly.
right? I can't. He was talking in terms of McDonough, but like I want to help the players, but I've got to do what's best for the organization. And if they blow him away, then I think you have to listen. Yeah. And if that's that deal, then you've got to make that deal. And I think he's told UC Saros that. That's another thing that he said consistently. I'm communicating with UC Saros. He knows where I stand. I know where he stands, and we're going to move forward here. But I think in saying that, it's pretty clear that he hasn't had that offer, anything close to something that has made him pause at this point. And that's also different than the mindset when Jared said Jared kind of said there's a debate going on, and he's absolutely right. To me, I've heard from some of you guys that it's time to, quote, move on from UC Saros. You just go trade him. That's a different thing than if somebody calls
that
and
I'm not agreeing with.
See, that's where I completely diverge from you guys. I'm not just going to trade him. If somebody comes to me with an unbelievable
gumballs.
Right. But I think it's clear what the market is right now. I think in the meantime, I'm like, if your goal is to go trade somebody, you're probably going to do it. If your goal is to make a deal, your goal is to do it, but that doesn't mean you couldn't get a phone call that says, here's an offer that you just cannot turn down.
Okay, with that being said.
Those are two different things to me.
With that being said, because I think I did say yesterday, the closer you get to that expiring deal, the harder it may be to move him, because teams probably look at it like, well, he's going to be a free agent anyway, so why do I have to give up anything to try to get him? But maybe, just maybe, because I can't see, if Barry hasn't gotten that deal that just wowed him yet, I can't see him getting it this offseason. Now, as you get closer and closer to the trade deadline this upcoming season, will the offers start to heat up? And if they do start to heat up, will you get an offer that is going to make you pause for a second? Because right now, I don't think right now they're not getting them because they can't. But even when free agency starts, I'm not sure if they're going to get them then, the offers. Because teams are probably like, I just wait. I'm just going to wait right now. I don't have to do anything. So will the offers ramp up as we start to get closer and closer to the trade deadline?
That's a good question. Is how will I think the market could always change as the season unfolds too. Like if they're working on a deal but don't have a deal when the season starts, I've seen this card being played by agents. Hey, if we can't get it done at the end of training camp, we're not talking. We're not talking during the season. Like, you could play that card. Yeah. Philip Forsberg didn't do that, and they negotiated through the season and got the deal done as he was moving closer to unrestricted free agency. So that could be what happens with Saros. And in the meantime, he could raise his stock or lower his stock.
Yeah.
What did Forsberg do in his career year or that contract year? He had 40-plus goals for the first time in his season. He upped his stock. He bet on himself. And he probably maybe got an extra $500,000 a year, maybe an extra $1 million a year for an 8-year deal. So it can go a lot of different ways. You just have to be willing to deal with the noise that will go with it, and it could be noisy. I think in a perfect world, they can come to a common ground of, here's what I think, UC, we could sign you to. You'll be happy. You know about the living situation here and the taxes and where you fit here. You love this community. You love this organization. And if you give us a little bit of runway here, this will help us build a championship team around you. If they can come to that agreement in the summer, then I think you do it. And the other part of this is a Scaroff, right? He continues in a theme. Barry Trotz, very, very same themes every time. He used the term unicorn. I think it's a great term. He physically, athletically is a unicorn. But what does he go on to say every time? There's still a lot more that goes into being a dominant goalie in the NHL. And if he can learn from UC Saros, that will only speed up his pathway to becoming somebody who fulfills his potential.
you bring up, if you can come to the terms of a deal this summer and you know that you want to bring UC Saros back, then you get it done if you can get it done. I have a question on that. What if UC Saros is demanding something, and how would you feel about it? What if it's something that you wouldn't align with your long-term plans? I do want to get into that coming up next. I want to get your thoughts on that, Willy. 615-737-1025 is the phone number. If you have a thought on what Barry Trotz had to say about the goaltending position when he was on with Jared yesterday. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, we're brought to you by Zen Sports. Start earning cash rewards on your bets today. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older and in Tennessee to bet. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. We'll catch up with Elliot Friedman in just about 30 minutes. We'll get Elliot's reaction to the Ryan McDonough trade, where the Predators go next. Purchase your tickets now for the Music City Grand Prix at the Nashville Superspeedway Friday, September 13th through September 15th at themusiccitygp.com. As the racing station 1025 The Game has a special offer that is just for a limited time. You can use the promo code GAME, G-A-M-E, for a 20% discount right now through June 16th. You can also tune in to the Indy 500 race on 1025 The Game this Sunday. Coverage begins at 10 a.m. So Barry Trotz, when I was Stillman and Company yesterday, addressed a lot of things. What was the genesis of the conversation with Ryan McDonough and the trade? Where do they go next? What do they do with all the money and the picks that they have acquired? And of course, the goaltending position came up. And Willie, you brought up something in the last segment that if UC Saros' people and the Predators can come to a deal this summer, and the Predators know they want to commit to UC Saros, just go ahead and get it done this summer. And we've talked when we have this conversation, we talk about the money in the years, and it's fair. Is it 7x8, 8x8? Is it maybe shorter term and more money, 7x9? But I'll ask you this, Willie. If you're Barry Trotz, what if UC Saros demands a no-trade clause? Because I know that UC Saros is looking at Yaroslav Askarov, and maybe he's not ready today, but that doesn't mean he's not going to be ready in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. And when that day comes, if that day comes, when that day comes, the Predators could look at it and say, okay, well, we'll trade UC Saros. Saros knows that. His people know that. What if he demands a no-trade clause?
Well, that's an important question because I do think that will come up. I do notice this in the argument about Askarov a lot. You guys are looking at things that could happen 3, 4, 5 years down the road. I commend you guys for having a crystal ball that has the future. I try to think about what in my life, what I know is going to be true in 3 or 4 or 5 years. I don't. There's so many things, so many different directions our lives can go in 3 or 4 or 5, especially in a team sport. Like that is a long range vision. How many GMs and how many coaches are going to be still in their current places in 3, 4, 5 years?
But
I mean,
if you're
so much is going to change.
Deal, I think you have to think about what happens 4 years.
You
from
do,
now.
but it's just kind of what the market is. Like I think that's sort of the answer we're working towards here, and that is he is going to have a certain amount of leverage, and Barry Trotz is going to have a certain amount of leverage because he's got different ways he can go with this. Like if Barry Trotz lowballs UC Saros and says, here's the best offer we can give you. It's 4 years at $4 million a year. That they're going to laugh and say, well, we're going to walk you up to free agency and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
The no trade clause, I do think is a tool. Number one, I don't know how much of a priority it is. This is a good question for Elliot at 1 o'clock when we bring him on. How much of a priority is it for UC Saros? Because it's a give and take. Okay, I'll give you the no movement clause, but you got to give me 6 years instead of 8 years. I mean, there's a sliding scale.
Yeah.
There is a partial no move. Okay, I'll give you 10 teams that we can't trade you to, right? So there's a lot of different things that you can negotiate. I don't think that Saros necessarily is in a position leverage-wise to say, I demand a no movement clause. I don't know if he's done that much.
What if he
right?
does?
Well, what if Barry Trotz offers him 4 years, $4 million? The answer, then you just wait it out and you negotiate. That Philip Forsberg, it was a tough negotiation, right? And it took time, but they got there eventually. So I think that's my answer: is if he demands, then you wait it out. If it's not something you're comfortable with,
my thing is,
even if you give a partial no trade clause,
you still can trade.
You can still trade him. What's happening in Toronto right now? This is another thing we'll ask Elliot with Mitch Marner. He has a full no trade clause, but it's very obvious that they're going to explore. Do you want to be traded? There's people that have no move clauses. You know who else had a no move clause? Ryan McDonough, a full no trade clause, and he went to the Predators and said, "I want to be traded." So things happen down the road. So Ryan McDonough has been traded twice with a no trade clause.
But he had to initiate that conversation.
He didn't the first time. It was Tampa going to them and said, if you don't waive your no movement clause or no trade clause, we will waive you. Which one do you want? Do you want us to try to orchestrate a trade, or do you want us to waive you where anybody can pick you up? So stuff happens. Like this, people deal with no trade clauses, And if Barry Trotz isn't comfortable giving a no-trade clause, you work around that. You maybe it costs a little bit more money to avoid that. Maybe it gives you less. It's just part of a negotiation, I would say. You can work your way around that. And if you're worried about how that's going to affect you in 5 years, if Askarov gets to the point where he's a dominant goalie, that's a good problem. To me, if I have two great goalies, that's a good problem. I'll work through that.
Short answer for me is if he's asking for a no-move clause, no. That's my answer. No.
I think that was probably the thing that they said with Forsberg first.
No, and then they end up giving it. I mean, you can, if indeed you want to make the negotiations go a little bit smoother, then you could say, if he comes with you with a no-trade clause, you can come back and say, hey, listen, we'll give you a partial. Or
if you want a no move, then we'll give you a 4-year deal.
Yeah, we'll give you a 4-year deal or a 5-year deal. Mm-hmm. If that's indeed what you want, we can accommodate that, but it's going to mean less years. It still may be $7-8 million, but it's going to be for less years. So which one do you want? I tend to think, guys want their money, and I know guys, when they go to places, sometimes they enjoy living in that place, but listen, the fact is you got enough money that if they do trade, you can always move back. So my thing would be, you know what? Damn the no trade clause. Just give me my years, give me my money. You feel you need to trade me, because I'm going to get my money anyway.
Yeah.
Regardless. And if I want to move back to Nashville, I can move back to Nashville. It's no big deal. That's the way I would look at it. But I understand how negotiations go. And that can't be, I'm not sure that would be like the end-all, be-all. Like, that would be the reason why the contract or the talks don't work. It's him asking for a no-trade clause. I think if it got to that point, I tend to think he would waive the no-trade clause and just get a deal done, long-term deal. And if they do trade him, then you're trading him. If he's playing well, more than likely you're going to trade it to a team that needs him in the playoff run, so it's going to be a playoff team.
It's just like anything else. If he's demanding $11 million a year and a no trade, I mean, it can be extremes what you ask for and then what you work towards.
Exactly.
But I think the important thing here is there is every indication that both UC Saros wants to work towards a deal, and Barry Trotz wants to work towards a deal. And when you have that, I think it's reasonable to I don't know about assume, but it's reasonable to project that there will be some flexibility on both sides before you reach what you hope is a good deal for both sides.
Yes. I would also look at it and say, well, if UC Saros wants to be here, if I'm UC Saros' agent, I'm looking at, the roadmap of I want my client to get what my client wants. And I see this young goaltender that might not be ready today, but can be ready in 3 years. Could be. I don't know. Could be ready in 3 years.
3 years is a long time.
But that's still 5 years left, what would be on, 6 years on UC Saros' deal. I don't want to sign this long-term deal just to be shipped off to Winnipeg, where my $8 million doesn't go as far, to a team that I don't really want to be at, and be shipped out of a city and with a franchise that I really like. So I do think that they would want at least a little bit of security.
Well, maybe. And you talk about that, right?
Of course, yeah.
And so it's been
I don't
granted.
think they'd be doing their jobs if they didn't.
Sure. So this is part of a tough negotiation with a great player that's done a lot. Ryan Ellis was a guy that took a hometown discount, could have gotten more money, stayed with Nashville for instead of hitting the open market where he probably would have made. I think he got signed for about $6.5 million, and Nashville turned around and traded him when he started to deteriorate health-wise, right? And that was a tough thing for Ryan Ellis. But this is the business you choose, right?
It's the business.
Was it a good deal for the Predators to hold out and get him to sign that? If Ryan Ellis could do it over again, would he have fought or maybe just walked to free agency and taken the highest dollar? Who knows?
Maybe.
And Willie, what is the and I'm not asking you like you're some CPA or something, but you've been around the hockey world for a very long time, and you've seen guys traded from one place to another, especially guys here. How does that work from a money standpoint if they're traded to a Canadian team? Do you know how that works? Because my thing is, if you're traded to any team in the U.S., hell, I mean, that's like, I'm not going to worry that much if I'm traded from here to, somewhere in the Bruins or so. Now, if I get traded to a team in Canada, yeah, because if it's me, I don't know the tax implications when I sign a contract for the Predators, but then get traded to Ottawa somewhere. I don't know the tax implications on that.
Well, I think you just have to, if you live in that city, I think there are ways to try to work around tax rules. Sometimes if you keep your residence in another city, for example, I think that helps. While you're in the city, though, I think you get paid and taxed like a resident of that city. I don't know all of the ins and outs of that. I think it's probably, your agent tries to help you through.
Exactly.
If you go to a city where it's a drastically different disadvantage.
Yeah, because I don't know how it is in, as far as Canada, how their taxes
they're definitely taxed differently.
Exactly.
It's a slightly different system of government altogether, right?
Yeah.
And you start getting involved with your visas, your work visas and stuff.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
And by the way, conversion is 37-cent difference.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I was talking to someone from Toronto the other day, actually, and she was telling me I lost when she was living in Toronto, lost over 50% of my paycheck. And that's massive. That's huge.
Well, yeah, I can see if I'm getting traded over to Toronto or something. I'm like, whoa, hold on, please. Trade me somebody over here in the States, not in Canada. Not to say that Canada is horrible, but I'm saying from a tax implication standpoint.
Same thing if you get traded from the Titans to the Giants. Taxes are much different.
But they're not. But what people don't understand is that, listen, if you design or put your money in certain things, you can sort of do what you need to do in regards to taxes. But we're making this big thing about, I don't think it would be about him leaving here and getting traded to New York. Yeah. Yes, the taxes will be a little bit higher, but it's not like we were paying him $8 million here. He goes to New York, he's only receiving $3 million.
Yeah, but the taxes do make money. You don't keep as much of your money.
Exactly. I get that part.
One detail we should share is even if you play in a Canadian market, you are paid in American dollars.
Okay. See, these are things I didn't.
Yeah. So everybody across the board is
even
paid
the teams in Canada.
In Canada, you get paid in American dollars.
Yeah,
your dollar tends to be worth. Your American dollar goes further in Canada.
Yeah.
So let's get back one more point on the no trade clause. Most teams, it's fairly common that a lot of players, and we'll talk to Elliot more about this at one. They have a varying degree of no movement protection. Or no trade protection. I'll give you an example of what's going on right now. And in the goalie situation, Boston, the last 2 years has had a two-goalie system, and it's worked great for them. As Barry Trotz said, when you have two goalies, you have a great chance of winning every night.
It's not like a quarterback.
Jeremy Swayman is a restricted free agent, and he took the job basically in the playoffs. So it looks like he's going to get a big raise. They'll pay him handsomely, and then they've got to deal with Linus Ullmark, who, by the way, won the Vezina last year. He has a partial no-trade clause. They were going to trade him to L.A., but he used his no-trade protection and stayed. But I feel like if you're Linus Ullmark, do you want to sit there and go, yep, I got a no-trade clause or partial, I'm going to stay here, knowing that Jeremy Swayman's about to sign a new contract? I think a player, a lot of times down the road, stuff comes up, and you're like, okay, I know I got a no-trade clause, but it's time for me to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
I feel like Linus Ullmark will probably find his way to another team next year and be the man. And Jeremy Swayman will be the man in Boston. So these things work themselves out, especially when you're looking 2, 3, 4 years down the road. And again, if Saros and Askarov are both awesome, that's only a good thing for the Predators. It'll work. It'll work out.
We hadn't touched on yet that if I'm UC Saros' agent, I'm kicking the doors. I'm seeing what I can get.
Of course,
I'm seeing if I can get.
He's one of the best goalies in hockey.
Because Barry Trotz said, "Hey, look, you want to be here? How badly you want to be here? So badly that you have to have a no move. Well, that's a different story than term and money." Want to get into Ryan's thought quickly before we catch up with Elliot Friedman at 1 p.m. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. What's up, Ryan?
What's up? I have one little kink to all your plans about signing Saros long term. Askar's contract's up next year as well. And I know he's an RFA, but if you sign Saros to, let's just say, 8-year, $8 million deal, Askarov could take around and turn the Radulov way and say, either trade me or I'm going back to Russia. And then if he goes back to Russia, his contract status is up in the NHL, I think, in 4 years. he can come back and be a free agent and go where he was, and then Preds lose twice.
I see your point,
call,
Ryan, and I was front and center as Ryan was, because I know Ryan, he goes way back with the team. That was a nightmare. But at the time, the KHL was brand new, and they wanted to be a big time league. They wanted to challenge the NHL. They wanted to try to bring the great Russian players back, and Radulov was like, yeah, I'll do it. And it's not like he was mistreated by the Predators or anything. He just left, just took up and left. If you look at the situation in Russia, I'm not trying to make this into a political thing with the war and everything going on there. And the success of the KHL since then, and if you look at how Askarov left the KHL, I'm not thinking history will repeat. It's a very different layout now. Could he do that? Yeah. But again, this whole thing about what if this, what if that, what if he does this, all of these are legit questions. But I still say you have to try to keep your eye on the target here. What is best for the Predators? What's the best way to win? I don't see a scenario where Askarov goes back to Russia. I think Askarov has bought in. If anything, he left Russia. He came over. He wants to be a great goalie in the NHL, and I think he will be patient. In the next contract, he is a free agent, a restricted free agent after next year, but he has no arbitration rights. I think you can get him to the next contract at a very affordable rate and have he and Saros, in theory, be a goaltending tandem that does not break your bank. And, if it goes well, a really darn good goaltending tandem.
And Barry Trotz was asked about the goaltending tandem, not just short-term, but long-term, because UC Saros. Barry Trotz did bring up, hey, if it's Saros and Askarov next year, then great. It seems that at this point, Barry Trotz obviously is aware of all of his options and is open to a lot of different options. Barry Trotz did touch on the long-term tandem. I do want to get to that at some point. We'll catch up with Mitch Light coming up next and Elliot Friedman at 1 p.m. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, Nashville's best deal of the week is Joyland in East Nashville. Joyland is a fun new concept by Chef Sean Brock designed to spread joy through his love of cheeseburgers, shakes, buttermilk biscuits, fries, and fried chicken. Get half off of a $30 Joyland gift card right now while supplies last at thegamenashville.com/deals and enjoy the best burger in town.
It'll be time on Friday once again to take it to the bank with F&M Bank. And you guys have been hearing us talk about F&M Bank a lot over the last several months. We love their sponsorship with us. It goes back to the end of last summer. So why are we excited to have them on board as one of our sponsors here? Whenever or whatever your banking needs are, F&M Bank will serve you with their 20 convenient locations across Middle Tennessee and Southern Kentucky. All have different financial goals these days. Whether you're young, you're coming out of college, you're trying to get your game plan together, maybe you just got married, maybe you just had kids, maybe you're a business owner. All your needs are different and unique, and that's where F&M Bank takes pride. They're a full-service community bank. They're there to make your financial decisions easier on purpose. It's hard to believe easy banking, right? But in addition to their 6 Clarksville locations, Sumner and Robertson counties, they're right in Midtown Nashville on West End, downtown Franklin on Main Street, Mount Juliet, Murfreesboro. Just go to myfmbank.com and find the nearest location to you. myfmbank.com. We take it to the bank Friday at 1:45. Equal housing lender, member FDIC.
Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. We'll catch up with Elliot Friedman in 10 minutes. We'll get his thoughts and reaction on the Ryan McDonough trade. But joining us now, Mitchell, live from Hoover, Alabama. Mitch, appreciate your time and thanks for joining us. Vanderbilt, Tennessee today. Vandy beats Florida yesterday. If Vanderbilt beats Tennessee, it feels like that's a pretty darn good resume to get into the postseason. But is just beating Florida yesterday enough for the Commodores to get into the tournament?
I believe so. I just think when you look at, college baseball is the committee traditionally has been beholden to the RPI and the metrics more than any other, more than basketball. And I think the RPI is up to 24 now. They're also introducing the KPI metric this year. Couldn't tell you what it is, but I know what the rankings are. And Vanderbilt's up to 18 there. So I don't see a scenario where, honestly, all 5 of the 13, 17 SEC teams shouldn't get in. Not trying to be an SEC snob here. I know you can pick apart Florida's resume, 13-17, barely over 500, lost their first game, played the number 1 schedule. You look at their SEC schedule, they played all the best teams in the West. So we'll find out. But I would be very surprised if Vanderbilt did not make it, even if they go lose the next 2 games, Caroline. But obviously a win over Tennessee, whatever their RPI is, top 5 RPI, number 1 team in the country, would solidify it. But, obviously a huge win and a huge pitching performance yesterday for Preston.
Now, how do you see this going, Tom, in the UT game and in Vandy game? Obviously, UT has gotten the better of Vandy, but how do you see this going?
It's so hard to say, Derek. I mean, obviously Tennessee's the better team. That lineup's ferocious, but I don't think they've announced the pitching matchups, and that's just so unique in college baseball. You get to the postseason, you get to the SEC tournament, and in the first couple games, teams aren't throwing their better pitchers because of the way the calendar works. Now, Vanderbilt's in a unique situation. They did throw Bryce Cunningham. Now, Carter Holton, who has, over the last 3 years, been their best pitcher, not necessarily this year, pitched Friday night, got pulled in the first inning. The trainer came out to see him after 2 batters, but then he stayed in the game, and there's been no word. So, if Carter Holton is healthy, he probably only threw 12 pitches last Friday, so he would be available. I'm interested to see if they go with Ethan McElvain, the freshman pitcher from Nashville or Williamson County, who has not thrown since injuring himself warming up against Florida about a month ago. And what will Tennessee do? They played last Thursday. Will they come back with their Friday night combination of Stamos and Causey? We'll find out. But, obviously Tennessee's got the better team in the lineup. This is a bigger park. We've seen some home runs today. The wind's actually blowing out to left field, but there's a lot of balls that are hit here that go out at other SEC parks that have not been going out the last 2 days.
And that was going to be my next question to you, Mitch. If UT doesn't put one of their aces on mound, what does that tell you?
It's interesting because the one thing about Tennessee, as good as they are this year, their pitching is not elite. I don't want to contradict myself because they're number 2 in the SEC in SEC games in RPI. But if you look at their hits per innings pitched and all that stuff, they've given up more hits than innings. They just don't walk guys. They're very, they don't shoot themselves. So Beam is kind of the big name pitcher, but they don't have that traditional ace that you would normally see of a top-ranked team in the country. So I don't really think it matters as much with what Tennessee does, and they're trying to get ready for the postseason.
And that's what I was sort of alluding to, yeah. Yeah,
they're going to be, no doubt, a top 8 seed. Will they be the number 1 seed? Will they be the number 2 seed overall? It doesn't really matter. They're just, we don't know the health of their pitchers. I assume everyone's fine, but if Drew Beam's throwing a lot of innings and they want to give him the weekend off, coaches come down here, and some of them want to win. They all want to win games, individual games, but for most teams, the goal is to be healthy and in great shape for next weekend.
It's one thing that you just alluded to, but I think it bears repeating, is the park plays so much differently. And what Tim Corbin has always said is the park in Birmingham or Hoover is somewhat similar to what you're going to see if you make it to Omaha. So it is sometimes a lens into see how a team's style will play. You have to be able to win on a field like this. And if your ballpark is a bandbox, and there are teams that play home games in their home park that might be a home run hitter's park, and they just go to town there. But then they get to Omaha.
Willy. You can call them out.
Well, you go to Omaha, and it's not. Well, Florida State would be one, right? Tennessee would be one. It's a home run hitter's park. Foley Field in
guy
Georgia.
Would say Tennessee.
Is Wake Forest a bandbox too?
Definitely, which makes their pitching over the last few years even more impressive. But that's another story. But to your point, Willie. Yes, and I've being here the last 2 days. the ball comes off the bat, and you're kind of programmed from watching SEC baseball to think, oh, that's gone, and then an outfielder runs it down in the alley. Now, I will say I don't know what it's going to be like later. I assume the weather's going to be the same, but like I said, the wind is blowing out to left field. I know LSU hit a couple home runs out that way, but even a couple of fly balls to Kentucky outfielders, you could tell they were kind of camped under it, and it took a few steps back. So I think the wind today, if it stays the way it is, will make the park a little bit smaller. But it definitely is. The power alleys are much bigger. It's just you're right. It's very similar to what you play in Omaha.
Okay, so just reiterate what you said at the start. LSU, Vanderbilt, Florida. Who are the Alabama, and South Carolina. Those are the 5, 13, and 17 teams. You believe?
I misspoke. I think LSU has no chance to play in the postseason.
Right.
All right. I think they're done.
I don't know if you've been watching. I don't know if you've been watching, Mitchell, but we're the best team in the country now.
I will answer Willy's question in a second. I know we're probably up against it. I will tell you, Caroline, that I left it was 2-0. I was hungry. I wanted some lunch. I'm like, I'm not leaving a 2-0 game. Then they hit a grand slam. So I left to go get some lunch. I looked, it was exactly 0.8 miles away, the place I got some lunch. I came out. The first thing I heard was, "Here we go, Tigers," 0.8 miles away. I could hear the chants from the LSU fans about a mile away when I was leaving lunch. But the wind was blowing that way, so maybe, the sound was going. But, Willy, to answer your point, yes, 5 teams. Alabama was perceived to be the top of the food chain coming in with a really high RPI, and they lost to South Carolina. So from a league standpoint, that was probably a good result, South Carolina beating Alabama. But it's beauty's in the eye of the beholder. When you look at these metrics, you can – a Florida fan's going to say, our schedule, number one schedule in the country. We played Arkansas. We played Texas A&M. We played Mississippi State. We played Florida State non-conference. We played Miami non-conference. Now, but then if you're a Vanderbilt fan, you say, well, you lost those games, and, Vanderbilt beat Florida 3 out of 4. So it's, again, you can promote whatever you want to promote, and a lot of times different committee members look at different things. That's why there's a committee. There's not just one dude picking the teams.
I think that is really the thing I'm curious about. Also, the politics of, if all 5 of those teams got in, you would hear some squawking from around the country, right? It's like, wait a minute. How SEC-centric are we?
They just don't get that it just means more.
Mitch gave the line that I use all the time. I don't want to be an SEC snob, but I am one, right? And I am too. These are the best teams in the country. Yeah. But I can see the other side. You don't want to just let everybody in because there's some bad press that comes with that. So I would be sweating if I'm on the bottom of that group of 5 there.
Yeah, I think Florida's the most vulnerable. Losing one game, losing 3 or 4 to Vanderbilt, the overall record. But it's just, again, we keep repeating ourselves, but it's true. Like, this is the best baseball. It's not like basketball where, like, the Big 12 might be better, the best league one year, or the ACC, but the gap isn't that wide, and the 4th best conference is still really good. The ACC is good. The top of the ACC is very good. Falls off after that. There really is. There's no doubt that the 11 SEC teams are among the best 35, whatever, at-large teams, and quite frankly, Ole Miss probably is as well, but they clearly don't have the resume.
Mitch Light of The Athletic. Mitch, appreciate your time and, of course, your boots on the ground reporting in Hoover, but safe travels back. We appreciate you.
And I was going to thank you. I was going to buy you a T-shirt, Caroline, but the LSU T-shirts are actually sold out. So sorry.
That honestly surprises me 0%. It doesn't matter if LSU is absolutely horrendous. They're still going to show up for a party.
They did.
All right, thanks, Mitch. We'll catch up with you soon.
Take care, guys.
All right, appreciate it. Mitch Light of The Athletic. Sounds like a party going down in Hoover. Always a good time at the Met.
The LSU fans never cease to amaze me. They're amazing how they can, because they're not just driving from right around the corner like Alabama and Auburn fans are to Hoover, because those they can bring it for that park too. But LSU is a long drive away, and they take over that park. It's awesome. They're fans.
Don't you know it's never too far for a party?
It's true.
Come on now.
I got that.
Same thing in Omaha. Yeah. Omaha's even further.
Yeah. Mitch, if you're listening, size medium maroon shirt. Okay, appreciate it.
I noticed the Hey Bulldog on the way in, the Beatles song. That was good.
All right, coming up next, Elliot Friedman, 32 Thoughts Podcast and Sportsnet will join us. It's a day early, but given the Ryan McDonough news, we had to get Elliot on the show to get his reaction, so he will join us on the other side. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 1025, 1063 The Game, and the Game Nashville app. We're streaming live on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook Live, and we are broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Joining us now is Elliot Friedman, 32 Thoughts Podcast and Sportsnet, who normally joins us on a Thursday, but given the Ryan McDonough news, we had to get Elliot on a little bit earlier in the week. So, Elliot, appreciate your flexibility with us this week. Your initial reaction to the news of the Ryan McDonough trade. What does this mean for the Predators, and what does this mean for the Tampa Bay Lightning?
Well, it's basically come to knowledge now, based on what Barry Trotz said yesterday, that this was something that McDonough brought up, and could he potentially go back to Tampa, or could that even be explored, or would that ever be explored? And he would consider doing it. And it's pretty clear Trotz just went to the Lightning and said, "Look, we have a player we really respect. We know you think highly of too. Would you want to do something with this?" And he said, "Look, I'm not going to make it hard on you. But you have to do something fair." And it was interesting that Trotz used the word fair, because it's pretty obvious he went to the Lightning and said, as long as you're willing to be reasonable here, we can get something done if you want to do it. And that obviously happened. So, what it says to me is that you guys want a lot of flexibility to do a lot of things. You still don't want to retain salary, because, you've already used a couple of your slots for that, and you still have Ryan Johansson for next season. It's a situation where, I think Barry Trotz clearly has some plans out there, some things he wants to do, and he wants as much flexibility as he can to do it.
And that's certainly what Barry Trotz now has. I mean, he is armed with picks and with cap space. Now $7 million freed up in the cap. 5 second-round picks over the next 2 drafts, 3 first-round picks over the next 2 drafts. And, of course, Barry Trotz can just choose to stick and pick and say, hey, we get more throws at the dartboard. That means more potential Roman Yossi's or Luke Evangelistas that were found in the second round. But Barry Trotz joined our station yesterday and said it's more likely that he's going to use those and package for a trade deal. Now that the Predators freed up, like I said, $7 million in cap space that they're not paying Ryan McDonough. So who would be potentially available on the market that the Predators could make a swing for now, given that they have more picks and more cap space?
Well, I answer your question first, Carolyn, with a question. What did you say about free agency?
He said, if I remember correctly, and as you know, Elliot, Barry Trotz is very detailed with his answers, which doesn't always work well with the clock on Sports Talk Radio, but we let him talk because it's so informative. Yes, no question.
Take that over the alternative.
But he said obviously when you $6.75 million for this year and next year that just opened up, he said we were going to have to be a little more careful in free agency. Now we have a little more space to go after some different guys. So I think he definitely said that's. He said we have all of these options: the draft capital, the prospect pool, and now a lot of cap space, so we have flexibility to go improve the roster.
Well, I think this. You guys are looking for centers. There are some centers who are going to become available in free agency. Lindholm from Vancouver, who didn't have a great year but had a very good playoff. I said on the pod today I could see you guys being in on someone like Zadorov, who, without McDonough on your blue line, it's not that your blue line is weak or anything like that. I wouldn't want to say that. You've got the hit king there, Lozon. But you certainly lose, like McDonough's a hell of a player who played really well. And he's someone who was physical, although, not like a punishing hit or anything, but he was a grind to get through. Trotz has talked about, making your blue line a bit tougher to play against, and a guy like Zadorov would certainly fit. Although, again, he's going to have a lot of interest in there after him. I look at a guy like Chandler Stevenson. That's a name that certainly jumps into my head. Center from Vegas.
Yes.
He seems like he's a He's a Western Canadian too. Barry Trotz has a prejudice, a fun one towards Western Canadians.
Right.
That is one.
And of course, he played for Barry Trotz in Washington, so there's a deep background there.
He absolutely knows him. That is a name I would be looking at. Trade-wise, I think they're, honestly, I know everyone's focusing on Marner. Look, there's going to be a lot of teams calling you guys because you guys have cap room and you have picks. There's no question in my mind that teams are that are going to be looking for teams that are going to be looking for cap room are going to be calling you guys and saying, hey, what are you looking at out there? What do you need? Another guy I kind of wonder about, and I'd have to look at your depth chart a bit, is someone like Dakota Joshua from Vancouver. He's a winger. He's not a center, and he's not a big scorer. But, he's the kind of guy I could see Trotz liking on his team. So that's another one there. But, the trade targets, Carolyn, I really have to start going through this. But I recognize the Marner noise. And at this point in time, I would say it is noise. But, it will come to be a point where that could be a thing. Other than that, I'd probably have to sit down and look at it a bit more.
All right, so let's address the Marner thing, because on the pod this morning, Elliot, you answered a question I had in my mind. This guy has a full no trade. They just changed coaches, brought in a pretty heavyweight coach in Craig Berube, who's got, as we like to say, skins on the wall, right? He's got a lot of credibility. And he might have a few things to say and say, look, I think I can get more out of this guy. He could do that. And you also said they also, even if they want to keep him, have got to sit down and talk with him about another contract. Because just like Saros here, July 1, they could extend him, right? So what's the timetable here? Because we're putting the cart before the horse. In fact, Barry Trotz was asked, and he had to laugh at the question and say, look, Mitch Marner is not a free agent. He's under contract. I can't answer a question about him. He goes. He did acknowledge that he hears the noise, as you call it.
He's an open book, but he's a rule follower.
Right.
Yes.
So.
Well, he doesn't want to get that. He doesn't want that fine. I'm sure the Predators pay him very well, but he doesn't want that tampering fine.
But the cart is ahead of the horse. If they haven't even gone to Mitch Marner and say, okay, would you consider being traded? And if so, can you give us a list of teams that you might like us to call, that kind of thing? Like, how would that process work, and when will that process start?
I think that process is going to start pretty soon. I mean, we're heading into the last week of May, and the draft is in a month. And Toronto would obviously like to know well before free agency if there's anywhere that Marner is willing to consider heading into the last year of his contract. I just don't think people recognize how tremendously complicated a process that this could end up being with Marner. I think it's volatile because I think, for one thing, he's got a no-move clause, which he's earned, and there is a sense that he's willing to wield it. Number two, his agent is a guy by the name of Darren Ferris, and his history is to walk his guys right to unrestricted free agency. He believes that is a right a player has earned, and he likes to walk them there to keep their options open. Now, doing that, Toronto could say, fine, if you want to do that, you won't be getting an 8th year on your contract from us, because you'll lose a year. Toronto could say that's the way we're not playing ball. Toronto could say that's fine. We'll have him play out the year, and we'll see where it's going. And I think if Marner stays in Toronto, or his contract asks in Toronto, could potentially be higher than it is anywhere else, given their salary structure. So there's a lot of balls in the air here. Now, first of all, any team that's going to try to trade for Marner is going to want permission to talk to him, to know what he's thinking about contract-wise. So I don't think we're at that point yet. Now I think he's a great player, and I think the thing that Toronto risks here is that, Toronto traded Nazem Kadri a few years ago because he'd been suspended in the playoffs twice in a row, and they were mad at him, and they traded him for that reason. and he went and he became a big piece of a Stanley Cup champion in Colorado. And I think that if you were the Maple Leafs, you'd be worried about that happening to Marner too. Him going to a place like Nashville, getting away from some of the craziness that's around him in Toronto, and he could really light it up for you guys there. Like, he could be a great player for you guys. And if I was the Maple Leafs, I'd be nervous about that. So I think they're going to slow down this process, see where it goes over the next month, what he's going to ask for contract-wise, and then make his decision from there.
Now, Elliot, what is the likelihood that the Predators can sign someone like a Marner?
Well, it just depends what everyone wants to sign for, right? I mean, it's going to be a huge deal, Derek. There's no question about that. The Predators will try to sell him on. We can't, maybe the salary structure in Toronto is their story, but that's not the way it's going to be here. And they'll use that the taxes are a lot better in Nashville than they are in Ontario, that's for sure. But it's going to be a big number. Your highest paid player right now is Yossi, and he's probably going to ask for more than that. So it's how comfortable you guys are. Now, maybe he takes less, but I don't know that. I think at the start he asked for more. So, you guys have to see, are you comfortable with that? And, but that's what it costs to get guys who have 100-point seasons and 90-point seasons like this guy has. He's a really talented player. And I think if he leaves Toronto, I think while everybody here will end up regretting it, including potentially Marner himself, I think he could really thrive away from the noise. Like, if he was available, I would, and I was an NHL team out there, particularly one who could use. Well, first of all, anybody could use a player like him, but a team that is capable of signing a player like him, like you would be, I would be all over the guy.
Elliot Friedman is with us, and kind of piggybacking on the Marner question, in a trade with Toronto, would it have to include UC Saros?
I don't think it has to. No. I could see Toronto being interested in a player like Saros, but they'll be in the same boat. They'll have to do a contract negotiation as well. I mean, you guys know that. I have to think that Toronto wants to solve its goaltender issue. And so I think Saros would absolutely be a target of theirs, but I think it's wrong to say it would have to be Saros. Like, if Toronto doesn't think that what Saros is asking for is worth it, then maybe they say no, or maybe they have to go in another direction.
It's a good question. Elliot Friedman is with us. So, Elliot, as we listen to Barry Trotz repeatedly in the different interviews, it seems to me the theme I'm hearing is that he has set a course to re-up with Saros until something throws him on a different course. Do you think that's a fair assessment of what you're hearing?
Well, it just depends on what the number's going to be, right?
Right, exactly. We know that that's going to be complicated, just like you said with Marner. But that's the intention, to try to start down that course.
Yes, but the thing is, and here's the thing here, Willie, you guys know what Saros was looking at. It hasn't been public as far as I know, but you guys knew. There was a point last year where you guys were like, I don't think we're going to do this. And you kind of dialed it back, and we'll see where we are. But what Saros is looking for is not a surprise to you guys. So, if you sign him for it, it's either he's relented a bit or you guys have relented a bit. But yes, I do agree that he wants to sign him. I do. I think that if there was a choice there, like an actual choice of what to do, I think you guys would absolutely sign him in a perfect world.
Okay, so here's another question that came up, which is, I think, a good one that we thought, okay, we need to throw this at Elliot. People are looking down the road, and I think there's a lot of things that can happen over 3 years or so, but another theme we're getting from Barry Trotz is Askarov is still a ways away from being ready to be the everyday number one goalie. So there's a gap there for a while. But in a scenario where Askarov maybe does grow into the goalie you hope he does, and he's 25 and he's ready to take the reins. And you've got UC Saros in the middle of a long-term contract. What about the potential no movement or no trade clause that could be part of this negotiation with Saros? How have you found that to be? What does that do to affect negotiations? A partial or full no trade clause as part of the mix?
Well, in a perfect world there, what you do is you say, okay, if you want a no trade or a partial, like for an absolute franchise superstar of a player like Yossi is, he's got the hammer, right? Like you guys gave him, I think he was the first guy you ever gave that protection to.
Yeah, I can't remember if Rene had it. I don't know that. Rene,
yeah, but that was a bit of a different thing. Like I think that one was a little bit. I have to double check that. Maybe did Rene sign a contract like later in his career?
Well, like it's funny you say that because he signed a 7-year, $7 million contract in 2011 that started.
Yes.
It kicked in when he was 30, which is exactly the same age that a new deal for Saros would kick in. Seven for Rene.
I thought Yossi got structure that you guys had never given before. I'll have to double check that.
Yossi and Forsberg are the two, but no doubt David Poile was very stingy, did not like giving that out.
Well, the thing is, like with Yossi, it was kind of like a guy, like you kind of had to give him everything, right? Like that was the way it went. He's just a franchise player. I think with Saros, what you do is you say, okay, Yossi, we'll do it, but I'm sure it's going to be a conversation about, is it going to be full for the entire duration of the contract? Can we have some flexibility later? Like it's not uncommon for a player to say, let's just say it's a 7-year deal for Saros. We want, if you want to no move, can we do it for 4 years, 5 years? And then we get some flexibility for 2 years or 3 years. That's a conversation. Also, the other thing that becomes part of a conversation is, look, if we're gonna give you the no move, then you're gonna have to give up on something else. Either you give up on term or you give up on numbers. Now, the thing that makes it a little more complicated for the teams like the Predators is that, more and more agents will say, look, okay, if you want to take us a little less money, then you got to give us trade protection because, like, let's just say he gets traded from Nashville after he signs to Toronto. It's a big hit in terms of taxes, right? Now, some things can change that, including where he is most of the time, like your residence. There's always some slight loopholes, but generally you can get hammered on that. So one of the things I think will be, if you want him to take a little less, you have to give him a bit more trade protection. That absolutely comes into the conversation.
We're talking with Elliot Friedman, 32 Thoughts Podcast. Elliot, whenever Tampa Bay made the move that they were, and the announcement that they were retaining all of Ryan McDonough's salary, I instantly went to Spotrac.com to check, okay, how much cap space can Tampa Bay possibly have? How could they possibly retain all $6.75 million of the salary, and now leaves Tampa Bay with $5 million in cap space? Steven Stamkos is a UFA at the end of this season. After the McDonough trade, do you think that it is more or less likely that Tampa Bay signs Steven Stamkos back? And if they do sign Steven Stamkos, then what in the world are they doing with their cap situation?
Well, you know what? There were some people, Carolyn, who predicted to me when at the end of the season that's where they thought that Tampa would try to get him to come into the $5 million range. Now, I don't know if that's going to work, and I don't know if that will be successful, but I know that people predicted it. I have to think that if they're bringing back McDonough and running it back, that Stamkos is going to be a part of that. Without knowing the financials, and I was told yesterday that there was nothing imminent, and so I'm always afraid of saying that because I hang up the phone and it gets announced and I look like a complete idiot, but I'll go with that for now. I just think it's more likely than not that he's there. Like, one of the things I've kind of wondered about is a guy you know really well there, and that's Tanner Jeannot. It just hasn't worked out very well there. He's been hurt, and it just hasn't been a great fit. And Jeannot's at, 2.6 in that area? I've kind of wondered if maybe that's what they do to try to create a little more room for him. But I just generally feel that, like the McDonough going there made it seem to me more likely that Stamkos would be back. And the way they talked yesterday, it certainly seemed to me that Stamkos would be back.
I still would love to know their capologist and how he's going to try to go about this, because I just don't see how it can be done to keep everybody who's in their core. Somebody from the core, I think, has to go out, even in addition to Jeannot. That's my math, but they may have got a guy that figures it out better than
Vegas goes by different math.
The thing is, Willie, like when you go out and you get McDonough like that, it says to me you're trying to win.
Oh, no
right?
question. No question.
Yeah, so,
but you've got a hard salary cap. Like, I'm curious how they go about this.
So what it says to me is, like, I look at all those guys in their core, and I look at them and I say, who are you taking out that you think you can still win with? Now, look, Carolyn, you asked me. I've been looking at while I've been doing this. You asked me, like, who could you trade for? Well, if a guy like Anthony Cirelli was available, I don't know how many points he's going to get, but I'd be looking at a guy like that. Like, that's the kind of guy that, if you're looking for centers, that you would probably look at and say there would be some interest there. Now, to be honest, if Cirelli was available, Barry Trotz probably would have known that in the conversations that they had last week. But so to me, it's like, it depends on what your number is for Stamkos. If your number is 5, then maybe someone like Jeannot is enough for you to fit in around them. But if the number is more than that, then yes, you are all looking at this and saying, the other name that people have mentioned to me, they're kind of guessing about is Chernak. But, Chernak is a guy that, he's played very hard for them. He's been, a very good player for them on very good teams. And the other thing about Chernak is, he's a right-hand shot. And, they've got a lot of lefties right now, and especially with the one that they reacquired yesterday, and they don't have a lot of righties with a lot of experience. So, again, I don't know how that really makes sense for them. I have to say, Carolyn, I was thinking about Carolina. And, look, like Kuznetsov's there. And, Barry almost traded for him once. So I kind of wonder about him. And, that's another guy that I would maybe wonder about for the Preds.
How about Brett Pesce, right? A right shot that could go alongside of Yossi. What do you think of that idea?
Oh, I love the idea, but that's I think they offered him around 5 times 5, and he turned them down. So that says to me that whatever he's looking at out there, he thinks he's doing better than that.
But if your budget has been 6.75 for McDonough, and you had him at 35 and 36, I could justify going above 5 for a guy who's younger, right shot to go with. I'm just thinking out loud here. It's a
good thought. It's not the worst thought I've ever heard you have, Willie.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. Now we're getting somewhere.
Not the worst. Pretty good badge.
Good job, Willie.
All right. Good stuff.
Conversation starter. That's not
exactly.
your worst.
Good.
Elliot Friedman, 32 Thoughts Podcast and Sportsnet. Elliot, really appreciate your time and appreciate your flexibility with us this week. Whole lot of big picture talks going on in this town, so we always appreciate your insight.
No worries, guys. My pleasure.
Yep.
Thank you, Elliot. We'll catch up next week.
It's going to be a heck of a summer. There's a lot that's going to be going on with this team. There's a lot of choices, options, stuff. There's going to be moves.
And you got
especially
picks.
with this trade with McDonough, because now it ensures you got to replace him.
Right.
And there's a lot of ways to go about that, as well as address the forwards and the goal. We got all kinds of stuff happening.
It's only because we talked yesterday about, okay, well, you get the second-round pick, you get the money. Well, yeah, you get that in return, but it also adds something else to Barry Trotz's to-do list of replacing Ryan McDonough. And as Barry Trotz said yesterday, you don't just replace Ryan McDonough. You got to find someone to put in that role. So coming up next, I want to react to what we heard from Elliot Freeman line Willy D-Mase. We're brought to you by Zen Sports. Start earning cash rewards on your bets today. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older and in Tennessee to bet. So you
Let's talk Zen Sports, people. The new sports book in Tennessee that's bringing sports betting to a whole new level, and I mean that literally. When you sign up for Zen Sports, you'll automatically earn up to $1,000. No danger first wager. If your first bet loses, you'll be reimbursed for the amount of your bet up to $1,000. Zen Sports also offers true odds on all parlays and boosted same game parlays for all Tennessee sports teams. That means boosted up to 20% over other books in Tennessee. You want some more good news, people? Because I got it for you. Zen Sports offers a one-of-a-kind VIP program. Who doesn't like to be VIP? Very important person, okay? If you qualify, you'll earn monthly comps at sporting events, concerts, you name it, even sport book bonuses. See, when you're part of the reward program, VIP reward program, see what you get. The program also, you got to be invited for this. You can't just jump in. So if you feel that your Zen Sports play qualifies for the VIP consideration, check out the program details and apply at zensports.com/VIP. So what are you waiting for? The daily same game parlay boost go quick. Bam. Just like that, they can be gone. So get going and download their app at zensports.com today. That's Zen Sports, where betting just got better. And remember, gambling problems, call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 years or older to bet here in Tennessee.
Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. Appreciate Elliot Friedman for joining us in the last segment. You can say Carolina Hurricanes, please. You know it's not a mental block there.
This is an ongoing. Is it ever going to happen?
I don't
Is
think
it ever
so.
going to happen without us just taking them aside and?
Nah, probably not.
Probably not.
Probably
And
not.
which
It's
should
just
it
a
be?
good bit
Should it
at
be
this
you,
point.
me, or Nick, Derek, that has the conversation?
I feel like it needs to be me.
Good.
It needs to
Okay,
be me.
just just come straight from the source.
Elliot.
Need to be you.
Can we work on the pronunciation of the name? I know this. We get texts every week. For some reason, and just so people know, we do notice this.
Or just say Caroline.
He doesn't use
Willy and D-Mase.
He doesn't use the line in Caroline.
Line.
Yeah.
He cuts it off Carolyn.
Carolyn, not line.
And
Lynn.
so every week we get a
Carolina.
text, a random text.
Yeah.
Do you notice that he doesn't? Yes, we notice.
We notice.
We got
it's
it, we
it's
got
an ongoing bit.
It's an Elliot thing. Don't
It's an
worry about
Elliot
it.
thing. Yeah, it's just it's an
But it's
inside
kind
joke.
of fun.
Exactly.
It's just kind of fun to see if each week we just
One
don't
day.
know. Maybe he'll figure out without us. But Nick, you obviously have not had behind the scenes a conversation with Elliot about this.
No, but I do have behind the scenes conversation with Candidly, yes, but not about this. I mean,
Do you think you could be the right guy to say, just so you know, like
I'll bite the bullet.
at this point it's been so long,
Yeah.
would he really just be crushed just to say,
He might be because he
oh,
would.
I'm
he
so
would
sorry
think,
that I've been doing this.
Man, why didn't
or
they
in his
correct
world,
me?
is it just better off for you to be Carolyn in his world?
I guess I am Carolyn
I mean,
in
that's
his
the
world.
current thing. But would we shatter his world if we changed it at this point?
When Mitch corrected me day one, he said my name is in fact not Mitchell.
Yeah, only my mom calls me
I still
Mitchell.
call him Mitchell. So
Yeah,
maybe
see?
Elliot
Yeah.
takes the same page out
Yeah.
of my playbook, and it's like, yeah, I know what your name is, but it's
McCarthy.
Carolyn.
It's kind of like
Carolyn.
the Canadian version of offense. In offense, they use a C, we use a S. Maybe it's like Caroline.
Yeah,
Maybe that's
yeah.
the
Could be.
Canadian
That's
thing.
true. And Adam Vinkin said, it crushed him a little bit when he typed favorite in a Sportsnet article and threw the U in there.
Yeah.
FAVOURITE, the Canadian spelling.
Defense
so-
with a C.
Yes, yeah, It's fancy.
That's how they roll up
It's
there.
fancy. That's how they roll.
So
Maybe
that
it's
has
just-
been a theory,
Yeah.
is that Caroline is more Carolyn in Canada.
Yeah, it could
It's
be.
a theory.
That's what it sounds like.
But these are all, it's
I
kind
like
of
that
fun
theory.
not knowing the true thing, even though the truth is there in front of us. We
Yeah.
can figure this out.
I like.
But it's kind of fun just to
Kinda
see
fun.
about the mystery of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
we'll just see how long it takes. We'll get a timer going.
Yeah, don't
Yeah.
say anything.
I'm a
Don't
second.
even say.
This
just
many
let 'em.
days
Yeah.
since Elliot Friedman has
Exactly.
not said my name correctly. But
Get
that's
the
okay.
chalkboard out. We'll
That's
start
okay.
it now.
Exactly.
And don't be that guy that DMs Elliot and
Don't
says,
be that guy.
don't.
Trust us.
Don't
be that
ruin
guy,
our
'cause
thing.
That's gonna
Yeah, we want him to
upset
keep
the force.
saying it. Yes.
Don't ruin our thing.
Yes.
But appreciate Elliot Friedman
Yeah.
for stopping by. He mentioned a few names, trades, free agents that could potentially, supplement this Predators roster next season and address the number one question of how do the Predators become Stanley Cup contenders. One name he threw out there, Chandler Stevenson. I don't know who that is. And Jared has a rule. If he doesn't know who he is, then he sucks.
That's not a good role.
Not a good
No,
rule.
not at all.
But Chandler Stevenson, 16 goals, 35 assists. It's not necessarily a name that blows me away, that knocks my socks off. But, Willy, I will defer to you, whether it's Chandler Stevenson, whoever that is, or any other name that Elliot threw out there. Who stands out?
Well, okay, let's Chandler Stevenson. Number one, he is a center. Okay, he's a face-off guy. He's got 2 cups, one with Barry Trotz in Washington as more of a role player, very young player at the time, and last year with Vegas. Last 3 years for Vegas, 64 points, 65 points, 51 points in 75 games. He is a really good two-way player. I think one of the reasons why he would be potentially a good fit is that in a sort of a top 9, you're trying to beat people with balance, and the quote number one center is not out there. I think he will be available because Vegas just doesn't have enough funds to keep everybody. I'm presuming he's going to hit the market. He's not going to be one of those $9-10 million per year guys.
Yeah.
I think he's a guy that has been one of the reasons that Jared hasn't heard of him, besides the fact that Jared isn't watching very closely if you haven't seen him. They won the Stanley Cup last year. You might have noticed last year he scored a lot of huge goals on their road to the Stanley Cup. is that he has played, by the way, last year in the Stanley Cup run, 10 goals, 10 assists, 20 points in 22 games. I'd say people that were watching probably heard of Chandler Stevenson.
That's huge.
So I don't think it applies to Jared's rule of if I haven't heard of him, he sucks. If Jared hasn't heard of him, that's on Jared. But he is not a number one center, but I think he could be, because Barry Trotz knows what makes him tick. So does he have that serial winner gene? I think he does. If they're interested, then he definitely does. Mm-hmm. He also excels on the rush. He's fast. He gets out on the odd man rushes. He's a threat there. We talked about this with Andrew Burnett. That's what I think he wants to add a little bit more to the Predators lineup. Speed, guys who can make it happen, who can get odd man rushes and convert. We talked about the stat that I know Andrew Burnett is telling all of the scouts, all of the people, look at this. We were top 10 in generating odd man rushes, but we were bottom of the league, bottom 10 in converting on those chances. We need a few more finishers. Stevenson is, I just think, a really good, solid player. I think of maybe a higher level of a Colton Sissons, right? Not a number one center, but a guy that, I just told you the points. That's pretty consistent. And also I think he longs for a bigger role. When you're playing behind Jack Eichel and playing behind Tomas Hertl, I'm trying to think of some of the other centers. They're a very, very deep team at center.
Yeah.
So he hasn't had a chance to be a little bit more of a feature. I think there's a chance he could get more production playing in a little bit of a bigger role, which I think he would see an opportunity to do in Nashville. And once again, it's bang for your buck. Am I saying go out and pay $10 million for him? No, but if you can get him,
solve your top
you can give him a raise that Vegas can't match, and you might get a really, really good player that makes you a better team for sure.
And as Travis points out in the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHand.com, Stevenson's points per game in playoffs is higher than Marner. I think it's also fair to point out that the Vegas Golden Knights have been playing in more playoff games over the past couple of years than the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, that's not to say that
per game though, is what he's saying.
Oh, points per game. Okay, yeah. Yes, then that's fair. Yes, that's fair. But also, that's the wart on Marner is sometimes he has a tendency to disappear in the playoffs.
But I don't think that's a true statement. He's got 39 points in 95 playoff games, but a lot of those, like I said, were when he was a very young player for Washington before he has gotten to where he is now. But I look at
Marner.
Marner has 50 points in 57 playoff games. That's more than 39 points in 95 playoff games. Is that what he was pointing out?
The texter says Stevenson's points per game in playoffs is higher than Marner.
That's not true. That's not a true statement. Now, Marner has never had a playoff run that Stevenson had last year. Stevenson, 10 goals, 10 assists, 20 points in 22 playoff games. He was in the running, I would say, for Conn Smythe. Like, he was that good for them last year. Of course, everybody was playing well for Vegas. They went on a tremendous roll, but he was a big part of that role.
What about Zadorov? Elliott brought Zadorov up in the third.
So now we're going to the defense part.
Yes. Yeah. So it would obviously, whenever the Predators made that move to move McDonough, the first place my mind went was scorer, which is kind of backwards because McDonough plays defense. But obviously you need to fill that role. Barry Trotz points out you don't replace Ryan McDonough. I understand that. And you're going to have to try. You're going to have to find someone to put in there to pair with Yossi. And this is actually something that Jared asked Barry yesterday of, do you fill that role internally or do you fill that role externally through free agency, through a trade? And it sounded like Barry Trotz was leaning more toward externally. That maybe some of these young guys, they're not ready to play that role quite yet.
Oh, no question. There's going to be a new, they'll get another defenseman at least in there somewhere. And part of it will hinge on, do they bring Carrier back? But somewhere in here, they don't have the guys that are going to fill the minutes that McDonough
And even if they bring, when they bring Carrier back, he's not playing that role with Yossi.
No, they already had him, and they still had all those minutes that McDonough was playing.
Right. So, Zadorov, obviously, public enemy number one during that Canucks series. Your thoughts on Zadorov?
Zadorov, to me, is a great third-pair defenseman that played, I thought, as well as he's ever played for Vancouver. And as Elliott pointed out, one thing he does have, he's got size and meanness, and he can defend. I don't see him as a replacement for McDonough. If he's part of a group, then I could see it. I'm looking more at types like Pesci. That's whose game mirrors McDonough's type of game. Gritty defender, plays against top players. Zadorov, like who's the top pair for Vancouver? It was Hughes and Hronek. Those guys played almost half of the game.
Yeah.
Zadorov was only playing, 15, 17 minutes. And again, I saw him play at the level I had not seen him play before. He's been in the league a long time. He's played for several different teams. I see him more as like a top-level third-pair guy, maybe a second-pair guy. McDonough is a top-pair guy, at worst a second-pair guy. So I think you're looking for a little bit more all-round game to try to finish, replace McDonough, and that's no easy task. But I think the player that resembles him the most is Pesci in a perfect world, except Pesci's even better because he's a right shot. That would fit with Yossi a little bit more. But you can't put all your eggs in any one player's basket, right? There's going to be a lot of different ways that they could go. I think you try to identify a lot of different kinds. And
they're the same age, Zadorov and Pesci, both 29.
Yes. That's what generally the age of guys that are becoming free agents are around 28, 29, 30 in there. And you could go with a couple different guys.
Yeah.
The other one that I think is interesting is Brandon Montour, who is also a right shot, and he's a little bit more of that Andrew Burnett, get up in the rush kind of guy. I think that's something to try to keep your mind on is, you need the big, strong guys and stay-at-home defensemen, but also in an Andrew Burnett system, I think he wants to rev up that engine with a couple more guys who can fly, get up in the rush, can make things happen, push the defense back.
Got to take a break. Coming up next, we'll get into your thoughts, plus Elliot Friedman's perspective on what if UC Saros is asking for a no-move clause. Once Barry Trotz and UC Saros' people really get into the thick of the negotiating, what if no move is one thing that UC Saros is prioritizing? We'll get into that coming up next, what Elliot had to say, and your thoughts as well. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
I think with Saros, what you do is you say, okay, UC, we'll do it, but I'm sure it's going to be a conversation about, is it going to be full for the entire duration of the contract? Can we have some flexibility later? Like, it's not uncommon for a player to say, let's just say it's a 7-year deal for Saros. If you want a no move, can we do it for 4 years? 5 years, and then we get some flexibility for 2 years or 3 years. That's a conversation.
That was Elliot Friedman on with us earlier this hour. Caroline, Willy, D-Mase. So one thing that we discussed earlier is, what if UC Saros comes to the table and says, I want a no move. I'm not signing unless I have a no move. Now, that's something that I think would be a little bit more palatable of, look, if we sign you to 8 years, we can say the first 4 years we will give you a no move. After that, no guarantees. No. I can swallow that a little bit easier, but the only thing is 4-year no move, that's 5 years from now. I'm still keeping an eye on Askarov in Milwaukee. 5 years from now, he'll be 26 years old. That's still a long time to defer the young goaltender.
Right, and there's, as we've said, the other side of that is there's a lot of different ways Askarov could be growing or not growing during that time. To me, this would only be a good problem if it gets to the point where you have a budding star in Askarov and an established UC Saros. To me, that's a good problem. I'll deal with that. And any stop along the way, 1 year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, maybe it's this summer. Somebody knocks your socks off and gives you an amazing deal for Askarov. Like, these are all things that can happen along the way. You maintain that flexibility and you still have both of those assets. I think that can work with the idea that at some point you can part ways with one of them if it makes sense at the time. And worst case, I have 2 really good goalies. Okay, I'll deal with that. But the partial no move, just to clarify one thing too before we get out of here, no move means you can't trade him and you can't send him down to the minors. A no trade means simply that. You can't trade him. Some people with no trades can still be dumped to the minor leagues. Let's hope it doesn't come to that.
Yeah, my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. No.
But so there is a little difference between, I just learned this a few weeks ago, that there is a difference when we say no move versus no trade.
I do
if we
use
put
it
UC in
yeah, I did too. I thought they were the same thing.
Something wrong.
If UC Saros is going down to Milwaukee,
something wrong.
You got big. You got big.
But these are the things that you can't predict over the next 5 years. Like, there have been plenty of players who signed a long-term deal and they're in the minors. Ryan Johansson.
That's true.
He's in the minors.
That is true. That's going to do it for us today. We'll be back tomorrow at 11 a.m. Stillman & Company's up next.
Be loved and loving your people. Happy Wednesday and peace.